Six-man miss. Straight ahead past the 40. Kicker to beat. There he goes. Worthy making a house call on a punt return. Xavier Worthy with a 75-yard return for a touchdown.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
Rattler on 3rd and 8. Herman brings pressure, hit as he throws. Jump ball! What a catch! Xavier again. He is him.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
2nd and 15. Mertz pumps. Over the middle. Pearsall. Touchdown Gators.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952. Have you subscribed to our YouTube channel? Search 365 Sports on YouTube. Brought to you by TFNB, your bank for life.
Benson through a gaping hole. Benson kicked in the turbo. Good night. Touchdown Seminoles.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com. Now, here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, here we go on this Friday. Jack McKenzie running the mothership. Craig Smoak, Paul Catalina, David Smoak. There is some new news, or at least options, speculation, and more when it comes to the college football playoff moving forward. And who better than to have the Director of Athletics at the University of Houston, Chris Pesman, join us right off the top of the show. And we apologize for the electricity out that we were on Thursday and part of the day Wednesday. It's glad to be back live in studio. Chris, thank you as always for your time. And yes, we will get into the men's basketball team and Kelvin Sampson and more. What are your thoughts about some of these, at least the speculation and reporting, that the 14-team playoffs would have an automatic bye for two conferences and also even revenue changes? What does that look like from your perspective and the Big 12?
Yeah, we're working through all that literally as we speak. Brett gave us a little bit of an update earlier today, and then next week I think we're going to have much more conversation around that when we're in Kansas City for the Big 12 tournament. So I don't have a lot that I can really comment on at this point other than it's been very dynamic and very fluid, and I can promise you that Brett is working his butt off in the best interest of the Big 12, and at the end of this, we're going to end up in a good spot. I'm not overly concerned about it, to be honest.
So when you hear things like these two conferences want the bye or they want this many, do you think that's just maybe a little bit of salesmanship on their part to try to negotiate maybe a sweeter deal for themselves?
I think there's a lot of public posturing right now about what people want, what they're trying to do, and how they leak information. I mean, what we heard last week was, the buys and the AQs, and then the public sentiment came back, and I think that recalibrated some people's opinion about how we should be handling this. And so, from what we felt like it was going to be 2 weeks ago, it's changed a lot. So it tends to be very fluid, and I'm pretty certain we'll end up in a very good spot and a spot that'll give us the ability to adapt as this thing plays itself out.
You just said something here that caught my ear. You said the public opinion on some of that stuff came back. Do you feel that now the leaders of the college football playoff and the conference commissioners are listening to the fans more and what they may like more than they have in the past? Because there has always been a disconnect between what the fans want and what they've been fed.
Yeah, I think we should. There's every reason to pay attention to what our public wants. If we're not listening to what the fans want, then we're not we're not doing our job very well. So I think that's been part of it. I think, some things that were out there felt really heavy-handed, and I think that maybe a lighter touch is needed with, larger conferences and the way they're attacking this. And I'm not necessarily talking about the Big 12, just others, without getting too specific. But it's just, we're at a point where I think we're going to have to make some decisions to keep this thing going but be mindful of what the public wants. And, I've told people that watched European soccer when they tried to create the Super League a few years ago, and the public sentiment that cratered that effort, because you were taking small market teams or smaller programs and you're basically, casting them adrift and isolating them and freezing them out from the ability to compete for a championship. And we see the success of what we have with basketball. Why would we not try to replicate that? And the smaller pool just, it creates an inability for the smaller programs to be able to get into the CFP. And certainly, where we're coming from, being an American and the path of access and how difficult that was, now at least we're opening it up more, and how open we get it over the next, 1 to 3 months or whatever this process plays out. We just have to be mindful of that.
Chris, you mentioned the long battle for Houston to find itself in a league like the Big 12, and obviously we'll see what the future holds, as you mentioned as well, but just the timing of seeing how everything's sort of falling and seeing the reports about what a G5 school might make. I mean, is there any doubt in your mind that the kind of the door was closing and you guys got in right at the right time, and that, just what is that feeling kind of like to know that, hey, at least we were able to make that move, because otherwise, I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. I mean, it's daunting. I mean, to think about where we'd be if it hadn't worked out. And I'm very proud of the efforts that the university created or efforted to get us to this point, even before I was able to come back here. Because it feels like a mob movie where they're closing the books, right? When you're either in, you're out. Not calling us the mob. I don't want to. That could be misconstrued. I better be careful. But at the same moment, the books feel like they're closed for now, and that's why you're seeing some institutions being pretty aggressive with ways to find their way in, and because you feel like you're at this moment where you're either in or you're out, and that chasm between the in and out is getting even greater. And, with NIL, transfer portal, compensating athletes, all the things that we're dealing with in our space, that chasm is only going to get bigger because resources are, finite, and more resources are getting pushed to the top than to the bottom. And how do you give yourself a chance to compete at the highest level? And, basketball for us, we're sitting here, and with the success this team has had, the thought that we would not have that option in a couple of years just, it drives us to make sure that we continue to present ourselves with that option. And if we hadn't, or we don't, then we're failing.
Chris, with all of what is happening, what you've been through, all of that, and then what is at least perhaps on the horizon, the Big 12 is going to fight scratch and claw. You mentioned that with Brett, and also the ADs and presidents. Does there need to be a plan B, or do you not even want to go there and think that way?
I don't know that we needed a plan B. We feel pretty good about where we are, not taking anything for granted.
Right.
Brett has been very engaged throughout this whole process. He's been great with us, keeping us up to appraised with the ADs and the presidents, the people he's talking to, the way he's connected. And he does an incredible job. You guys know this, but his Rolodex, his access to people at the highest level that are decision makers in this process, and the way that he represents our conference has been extraordinary. And, I don't want to, you never take anything for granted, but we feel very good about where we're at and about our future. And so the plan B hasn't really been that much of a concern. Obviously you're mindful of it, but I feel confident about where we are and where we're going to be by the time this all shakes out.
Chris, do you feel a tide turning also in the player I don't want to call it player employee space, but at least among ADs, where you guys would like a real structure, whatever it comes out to, bargained, whatever, just so that you know how to build an athletic department over, because it's not like something you can do year to year. You have 5-year plans and 10-year plans that you'd kind of like to know this now, what it's going to be?
Yeah, please. I mean, we're trying to solve an equation without knowing what we're solving for. It feels like, and I wasn't a great math student, obviously, if you know me, but you're sitting here and it's like you got this, highly structured formula and you're missing all these inputs that you need to be able to solve it. And for us, the structure around what the athletes are going to look like, if they're employees or not, the compensation around that, we need those answers so we can start driving towards, how we're going to build our business. You spend a lot of time thinking about this, and you think about the way our business is set up, where it's been, the sports teams are really isolated to an extent, but, do you start setting this up like real pro franchises where you've got the front of house side of business, which in a sense we do, you've got your external side and your internal side, but do you really start setting up where on the sports side, you have general managers, right? Which in this case would be head coaches, but with the volatility of rosters, how do you start building your recruiting department, your player personnel departments, things like that, and building the structure around how you start supporting those programs and the transition of athletes in and out, because you're going to have to be a lot more aggressive in the transition space. But again, that comes back to resources where those things live. You're hearing conversations about people taking their recruiting departments now, or considering taking their recruiting departments out of athletics and parking them in the collectives because there's no rules now. And then the ability for those individuals that recruit within the collective to go to the recruit and cut deals. And you just like, what? Wait, how do we get there, and how are we solving those things? Because I use the analogy building a house. I want to know where the first center line is on that house so I can start building out from there. And right now we don't have that. We've got a lot of moving parts. So it's hard to start building the economics of this and then the structure that has to go around it. So the short answer is yes, we need those answers.
Chris, obviously the conference and other conferences continue to evolve. I mean, there's going to be another 4 schools again next year, but you're about 3/4 of the way through the first full year in the Big 12. Just what have been your impressions? What has been kind of the experience thus far? Obviously a very successful basketball program that we'll dive more into, but just in terms of the trips and the teams coming to your place and the games themselves, what's been your impression of life in the Big 12 through almost an entire year now?
It's everything we could have hoped for, and it has been awesome. Obviously, we want to be competing at the top end of the conference for conference championships across the spectrum. But I'll give you an example. We've got baseball is playing at home this weekend with Baylor. I think there's less than 500 tickets left for each of the nights for our baseball series. Softball plays Texas at home this weekend. That series is completely sold out. And obviously, we've got Kansas here in basketball tomorrow, and that's been sold out for months. That is what our fans have been dying for, and to see it and then be competing at a high level like we are in many of our spring sports is just this is it. This is what we wanted, and what's so cool is the regionality. You and I, we've all talked about that in the past on this program, but the fans from Baylor being able to jump in the car and drive out here for the weekend. It was us a couple of weekends ago when we were up in Waco for the basketball game. Drive up, drive back in the same day, stop at Buc-ee's, have a great trip. That's what this is supposed to be. And the fact that we're experiencing it at such a high level it validates everything that we had knew was possible, and to see it really start coming together. And, we're going to get there a lot sooner than people think. I really believe with football as well. Willie's get here and the excitement and really the wind is at our backs around there. I was out of practice this morning, and it's just, feels like we're really, really close to being at the high end of this thing as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah, and he's been there now for a couple of months. We had him on this show, and we had him on when he was at Tulane as well. Your overall thoughts about how they've put their machine together, it was even faster than you thought, the assistant coaches, everything that goes with it?
He was very thoughtful, and that's what I appreciate about Willie. And nothing against anything that we've done in the past, but just the way he goes about building a program. By and large, we lost a couple kids in the portal, but which we saw at other places when we had head coaching changes in our industry. You'd see a rush of kids hit the portal. I mean, that may still happen to us before the season, but that hasn't happened yet. The kids that are here really want to be coached. They want to be good. And we've got a great staff that's built around them that I think is going to give us a chance to be successful. I don't think I know is going to give us a chance to be successful.
What is Willie Fritz like in a job interview? I mean, we talked to him a bunch of times, but I'm just curious because he is such a smart dude, but like in that position of you're trying to get a job, everybody can be kind of different. I'm just curious about that.
It was awesome. It was very conversational. I'd never really, it's shocking. I'd met Willie a couple times, at, coach, like conference meetings, things like that. And, have a drink and just shoot the bull a little bit. But during the interview, it was great because his vision and his excitement for the opportunity here at Houston and his connections back to the state of Texas and to the institutions that were around here and his familiarity with what we are trying to do here was just, it was awesome. And it was not, we weren't selling each other. It was just, we knew who he was. He knows who we are and what we want to do together to be successful. It was really a conversation. And the hardest part of it, frankly, was just respecting what they were doing through that process, because much like we had happened to us a couple times playing in a conference championship game, we did not want to distract from that. And he told us during the interview, he goes, look, I'm not going to take this job over the team I'm coaching. And frankly, that sold me. I was already sold, but hearing that, his approach about it, but you guys know how these things work. We met Sunday before before they played. And then we talked, everything went through his agent. So not being able to talk to him, and you get towards the end of the week and you're like, we feel really good about where we are, but we're trying not to distract him. And you just like, man, if this thing goes south and he doesn't sign, I'm screwed. I'm going to be out of a job. But fortunately, it worked out, and I was able to sleep really well Saturday night after they had played. But there's some really uneasy moments when you're sitting there and you're like, man, I hope this works out, because we got to go back to the street and start all over again. It's going to be rough, and we're going to lose some time, because really what you also get worried about is how much time does the search take. You don't want to rush it, and you want to be very intentional. But particularly with the transfer portal opening up the Wednesday after, or the Monday after the championship game, you can't be sitting there with an open job, because the risk of losing your team is so great. And fortunately, everything worked out. But you have those moments of just frankly high anxiety, just making sure it works out. But we're in a great spot.
Chris, I know you got to go and also get to your weekend, too. We appreciate your time. When you look at the conference with Texas and OU all but out the door, basically all but out the door with some competition still left, is there a different feel in the room when it's the 12 and the incoming 4? And are there even meetings without Texas and OU in them? And how do those go?
Yeah, Texas and OU have been in the meetings really up until – they weren't on the call today. Today was just more of a catch up on just, conference stuff for next week with the meetings coming up. But there's a lot of collegiality, and it's funny saying that in our industry right now, because it's a great group, and everybody's in it for the right reasons. The group that's coming in from the Pac-12 with the volatility that they've been going through for the last couple of years, our transition working into the league, and the remaining 8 members is what we call the existing members that were on there, the R8. Everybody's been really, really good. Everybody's in it for the right reasons. It's fun because now we're, 6 months ago, we weren't playing each other yet. We hadn't really competed in the league as we got ready for the fall. But now that, to your point, we're about 2/3 of the way through it. And you get to see people on their own campus during basketball and football games or whatever sporting events, but also just that common interest of promoting and developing the league, but also during a period of incredible volatility in our business. And everybody's just trying to figure it out together. And it's really a good group. There's not any, pride in ownership or anything like that. It's just, hey, let's figure this out together and figure out the best way forward. And from a competitive standpoint, I'm really excited about where we are. Obviously with basketball, it's through the roof, but also what we're going to be at with football, because it's not that, UT or OU dominated it. I mean, more OU obviously than Texas, which we all like to point out. But the league's wide open. I mean, Utah is going to be a load coming in. Obviously, there's a lot of excitement around Arizona, what they've been doing in Colorado with Dion. Arizona State's got a younger head coach and what they're building. But this league's wide open. There's not anybody in this league that's, the 800-pound gorilla. And I used women's basketball when we were in the American with UConn. Every year you knew UConn was going to win women's basketball. There was you were who's playing for second. That's not the case. And everybody's investing so heavily in their sports programs and their departments to compete. And it's fun, and knowing that we've got a chance to be there at the end is what's so awesome, and doing it with a great group of people doing it together.
Chris, there's a couple of Houston fans that have asked me to ask you about the stadium, your football stadium at TD. Yep. ECU, any fan experience changes? I'm just going to throw it in there since we have you on. It may be Big 12 Media Days before we see you again. Anything like that? Or are you guys pretty set for right now?
No, we are right in the middle of a $140 million project. We're building our football end zone facility. That will be partially done for this fall.
Okay.
We broke ground about 60 days ago. The project is, I don't want to say ahead of schedule, but because I don't want to jinx us, but we're right where we need to be. Actually, steel starts going up next week. The new video board will be operational for next fall, and then we'll move into that new building for fall of 25, which will have about right around 1,500 new premium opportunities for our fans with new suites, club, and party decks. And that thing, and then we're looking at other amenities we're going to be able to add back into the building as a whole. Once we get a little bit further along in the project with the money that will be available, increasing points of sale for concessions, Wi-Fi, sound system, all those things. Every time we touch a building, we're looking at ways to be additive for the fan experience. More vertical transportation, moving people up and down. What we're fighting in this space, and you guys know this, is how do I get people off the couch and come in and experience our venues in person? Mm-hmm. We are through the roof in basketball, obviously, much like Baylor is. Everybody's downsizing venues so you can make them more intimate. Football will still be right at 40,000 seats, maybe a couple hundred seats less than that. But what we're doing with the video board is, I didn't know this, because when we were designing it, we wanted to make sure the video board was appropriate. I was like, look, I'm not looking for any marks or awards or anything like that. I want it to be the biggest. I just want it to work and be efficient. But the reality is it'll actually be the biggest video board in the state of Texas, wow. Which I did not know that. Yeah, it's going to be significant. So we're working towards those things to make game day the best experience possible for our fans. And we're never going to be satisfied with that. That'll be something that we're always tinkering with and trying to improve upon.
And that's why the call today with Brett Yormark, you feel good about what he's doing as you move forward, and that's why you can then put the new scoreboard or video or the stadium changes, right? Because you feel good about where the Big 12 is going to be no matter what might be the speculation.
Amen. Yeah, I mean, there's schools that are making decisions now to pause building construction or delay it as they saw the NIL. We were fortunate that we were far enough along with the fundraising around that facility, but also knowing where we need to be with what we're competing against. We had to get that done. You've seen the impact with the investments we've made with basketball, and now how that program is trending. And for us with football, this is the last major construction piece we needed to get done. Everything else from here will be additive, but this was like an appendage we needed to add back into the body. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about what Big 12 is and about our future. We're going to be in a great place, and we'll be competing for championships here a lot sooner than people expect.
Chris, as always, great stuff. Thank you for your time. Good luck. Have a great weekend. Good luck to the Cougars in Kansas City.
You as well, my friends.
You too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You as well, my friends. Let's see how we do tomorrow, and let's get through KC, and let's keep playing for a while. And I appreciate you guys for having me on, and have a great weekend. Go
you
Cougars.
too. Chris Pesman, thank you again for him being a part of the show. Houston and Kansas tomorrow down at unbeaten Houston at home, and trying to wrap up a sole possession of the Big 12 regular season title. Guys, anything from what he said? Obviously, from the time he was talking about the Big 12 call today to get ready for next week when they'll meet again in Kansas City, seemed to be pretty much full throttle, understanding the landscape, but also feeling good about where the Big 12 sits, even if reality is still what it is with two conferences being massive in the others. And we'll get to some of the reporting on that today in just a second.
Yeah, I don't ever like to get too comfortable with anything that goes on in realignment or college football playoff or anything ever.
Yeah.
But it does make me feel good that he feels good that, a lot of things were posturing and not maybe based in reality, and that there might have been a little bit of, you know, people heard like, hey, we're not going to like this. So I hope that sticks.
Yeah, it's like, you know, obvious now at this point that there are things that are floated out there to get a reaction, and then people go crazy on Twitter or radio or wherever and act as though it's something that's actually happening. In reality, it was just a test balloon to kind of see, you know, what's what, and who knows. I mean, we're going to get to, hopefully on the other side of a break, the headlines from today, and obviously that's the major news that everybody's talking about. But, yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. I don't really feel a certain type of way based on the news today because, again, it's nothing that's officially happening, although it's an obvious sign that kind of what everybody's been expecting is continuing down that pathway with a split of some sort monetarily or in general. But, yeah, I think you're reassured a little bit if you listen to what he has to say. Look, here's the thing is, like, the Big 12 is not going to go anywhere necessarily barring an exodus of teams. So, you know, if there's a Super League in the future and they want to go grab like 8 teams, they're like, hey, Kansas and Oak State and West Virginia and whoever else, you know, jump on board, then maybe you'd see a dissolution there. But, I mean, you're talking about a school in Houston that's going under the thing that's being floated today would have been making $2 million, and they're making over $10 million more than that. Yep. So I think he's excited to be where they are as opposed to where they were, which is why I asked that question about, you know, life in the Big 12 partially. But, yeah, I don't think anybody can feel great unless they're in those 2 leagues. And beyond that, you just do what you can do to try to just be as close as possible in whatever category it is as you can be to be competitive. And look, if there's a big split one day, then you position yourself the best that you can to be ready for that. And that's all you can do. But like this whole the sky is falling thing that I kind of see, or this act as though, you know, if there is a split that all of these programs are just going to go away, I just think it's just people trying to feel better about themselves in a lot of ways, and I don't think that it's exactly the way that it's going to play out. So, yeah, all you can do if you're Chris Pesman or Mack Rhodes or anybody else is position yourself the best way that you can. You've got to have confidence in your commissioner. You got to have a game plan for different possible endings, and, you know, as long as you've got that taken care of, then, you know, the rest is going to be out of your control. But if you position yourself well and you have confidence in the people around you, then, yeah, that's what it sounds like to me is what they have. And, you know, we'll see what happens from here.
Be proud and respect yourself and what you have and what you provide. When we come
kind of
back,
like with the whole, Ross's article of the whole.
Well, let's get to that.
No, I think we should take a break probably.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, but I'm just going to say is that in his article, there's pushback on the automatic qualifiers for the Big Ten and the SEC. So imagine if you just sat back and took that, and they just fly it on through. So, yeah, you got to have a little bit of fight in you for sure.
Let's come back with some of the quotes in the Ross Dellinger article. Dave Wilson from ESPN also had a note. That is coming up next. We do appreciate you, man. We've missed the last couple of days. Paul didn't. Craig didn't, but I did. That's for sure. And Jack absolutely didn't.
Well, we were sitting in the dark here.
We popped up at 3:25 on Thursday afternoon, and it was out, and a lot of work from electricians, Jack and Paul behind the scenes too. When we come back, there's a birthday boy today, or maybe it's tomorrow from the chat room. We'll tell you about that. But, so what's being discussed now when it comes to the college football playoff, the revenue distribution, automatic qualifiers, first-round buys, next on 365 Sports. PettyClinicLowT.com. Dr. Kent Petty can help you become the high-performance man that you want to be, need to be, and used to be. But he also can help you with the everyday, what you need, family doctor, to help you if you feel like you have the flu or you feel like there's something that's just not right, getting blood work for not just testosterone, but for everything else. And you just need a little bit of a kick in the butt or a diagnosis of why you don't feel 100%. And yes, testosterone has a lot to do with that, and he can help you with that. In fact, he can set you up with blood work. He'll take care of it. You give the blood, he gets the results, and then gives you a diagnosis and some options for your testosterone, but for also if you have just the common cold. Dr. Kent Petty at PettyClinicLowT.com.
Rev up your excitement. Celebrate the spirit of adventure during the Jeep Celebration event. Join us at Allen Samuels in Waco as we roll out incredible deals on rugged and reliable Jeep vehicles you love. Seize the moment and drive home in the new Jeep of your dreams. With special financing options and exclusive offers, there has never been a better time to explore the world of Jeep. Hurry in, the savings won't last long. Visit AllenSamuelsDCJ.com and see them firsthand only at Allen Samuels in Waco. Let your adventure begin.
Come by, let's be friends.
Stepping into the boots of a U.S. Army officer can add confidence and leadership skills to your son or daughter's career path. See all the things they can achieve in our boots at GoArmy.com. U.S. Army Waco Recruiting Company, 254-598-8131 or 254-776-1543.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
Camille Johnson Realtors guide you seamlessly through the process of buying your dream home or selling your current one, commercial, farm and ranch, or residential. Camille Johnson Realtors can smoothly and successfully lead you through any transaction. With a team of 28 experienced agents who are excited about serving you, Camille Johnson Realtors services the entire greater Waco area. If you're in the market to buy or sell, contact Camille Johnson Realtors, 104 Midway Center in Woodway, or find them online at www.camillejohnson.com. Camille Johnson Realtors, elegant, charming, warm. Welcome home.
Parenting is full of surprises.
You never know what to expect.
So after our son was born, I called my Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent to set up a life insurance policy in case something happened to me.
Sawyer is now 2.
And we'll soon have a sister. There's no one else I would trust with protecting my family.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Baylor alumni are more than 160,000 strong. When we all join hands to support our university, we don't just move the needle, we move mountains. Working together, we create life-changing opportunities for students on the field, in the classroom, in the laboratory, and in life for generations to come. So get connected, get involved. Learn how at baylor.edu/alumni.
Let the journey to financial brilliance begin with Genco's limited time offers. Max your earnings with a Kasasa cash account and get paid monthly with a 4.25 APY. That's $425 annually. Then invest in a 13-month share certificate and earn 4.9 APY. That's $529. Earn cash and outshine the rest. At Genco, we offer you the sun and the moon. Kasasa based on average daily balance of $10,000. Certificate based on $10,000 investment. See GencoFCU.org for details. NCUA.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
Max Olson at 4 o'clock today. We'll also hear from Chris Lowe. We'll also today hear from John Kirch, Tony Caridi, and Grayson Grundhafer. But we're now again, going to look at some of the reports from today. Some of this is more of an update or a change in the narrative or even the angle of the story. A proposed socialized with administrators this week. Big Ten and SEC would combine to earn about 58% of the college football's base distribution, a figure that will grow in participation, distribution, depending on how many teams get in. Also, the figure would then greatly exceed what the ACC and Big 12's combined distribution number will be, roughly expected about 31% of it, and the remaining amount about 10% with Notre Dame and the 64 group of 5 teams, which is what Chris Pesman was just talking about. Craig asked the question, $2 million before and now getting $10 million or more at least for the next year. Now, this now takes a backseat to even the format, which we'll get to in a moment. So would you do that? 58% for 2, Big 12 and ACC get 31%, the 11% or so left goes to Notre Dame and everyone else.
I mean, if I had to, I would. I'd try to get a little bit of a better number. And look, if your money's going up, I mean, I guess that can be the benefit for that. But I would still push back a little bit more into, making sure that the two don't run away and hide as much as they want to run away and hide. Now, look, they have a ton of teams in those leagues, but if you combine just by amounts, like right now, it's 34 to 33. So, they've got one more total team in that bunch of the rest of them. So I don't know. I think it's fine. It'd be okay. And I'm not a numbers guy, but still, you just don't want to get the gap is that's what's going to keep getting people, especially in the ACC, saying, well, how are we supposed to do this if they already have a big TV gap, and in this thing that we're all in together, their gap in that is even bigger.
Their gap would be the SEC, Big Ten, about $300 million more than the ACC and Big 12 every year.
Yeah, so you're not helping shrink those things at all with this.
Yeah, I mean, it's not their jobs to make sure that the Big 12 or the ACC survives. In fact, I want to congratulate whoever sat in a dark room a decade ago, whenever it was, and schemed up this whole idea of how we've gotten here in the little, because this is just it just feels like some of it's winged a little bit. Some of this was just winging it and it fell the way that it fell. I don't know if the design was to necessarily have Cal in the ACC. But I think a lot of the other moves that have been made, it just feels like part of a grander design. Does it not? It's all been leading us here this entire time. And I can't help but get that feeling every time another domino drops. And so it's, in some people's eyes, been inevitable that there was going to be a split of some sort, or it was just obvious based on reading the tea leaves. I think there's a lot still to talk through with this. Obviously, it's being socialized, as I think is a very important word there. It's not being finalized, but socialized. But there does come a point where there's such a gap that, yes, thank you for allowing us to participate, but is it worth it in the long run? Or would it be better for you guys to go ahead and break off and go make whatever money that's going to be, and we'll stay back and we'll play more of what people consider college football? Well, we'll still have to pay our players, but you'll just pay your players more and you'll get the better players, and that'll pump up your numbers and juice those up, and your historical record books will look great when it comes to various other categories, because now you can just, buy players basically. But I think for the Big 12, and the ACC, it's just, the ACC is in such a tough spot because this is only going to force more of a move than was already being forced to begin with. So it feels like they're in a different category by themselves. Whereas with the Big 12, they could always get some teams picked apart. But at what point, to Paul's point, does the gap become so large that it's not even worth putting up the fight anymore? Where it's just thanks for passing us some crumbs, but that's not even worth it, because
would you rather than break off something inside of you?
Yeah, I guess that's a way to put it. Yeah. Sure. I just think that at some point you're not even playing the same game. So what's the point of continuing to try to pretend like you're playing the same game? Yeah. So we already have the deck stacked against us because of history and because of TV contracts and because now two groups have basically accumulated all the biggest brands. That's fine. We can acknowledge that. We're appreciative at a seat at the table. But at some point when these leagues are making $300 million more to play the exact same game and play for the exact same title in the exact same format that we're playing for, we're not playing the same game, really. I mean, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. And so at what point does it no longer become worth it? At what point do you just say, all right, this is so ridiculous that y'all go play for what y'all are going to play for. We'll go talk to whoever about where our games can be played and what we're going to go play for, because this is not the same thing. And I don't know if that hurts college football's, fandom overall in the long run or not. But I mean, it's kind of like the way things are going. It's just you're not playing the same game. Especially the money thing matters so much because we're not talking about competing over facilities anymore. We're talking about actually going out to buy players and do things of that nature. So it's just so lopsided that you're really not playing the same game if the money becomes that unbalanced, and it already is. But I mean, today, another $300 million difference. Like, what are we even talking about here? That's not there's no way to overcome that.
That's why leagues have salary caps, even though some can abuse them and then get stuck, or some can pay that threshold fee, whatever. College football is not doing what most professional leagues do. Now, some owners spend more than others, but you're right, it'd be $300 million. And then another one. And not on top of that, the TV money in the first place before you even get the money for the college football playoff. And you're going to get units, so to speak, depending on how many teams you get in the playoff, on top of what you're going to get just because of the percentage.
So you're already sitting there if you're any numbers. If you're like Houston compared to Ohio State, like that's never going to shrink, and I don't think you expect that you're ever going to be on par with them just because you can't compete with their history and their amount of alumni and all that. But now when it's set up to where the networks and the playoff and all these other entities are designing it to where they make another $200 million more than you or whatever the number is, it's just like, what are we even doing here? I mean, how are we even going to pretend like this is competitive when we already have a hard time kind of pretending that, but there's at least a close enough gap that you can see scenarios where it's still competitive, right? This is to the point where it's like, it's so
like
lopsided. Yeah, it's so lopsided. Yeah. It's like, what are we? Let's stop pretending. Let's just y'all go do y'all's thing. Y'all go make all that money. Everybody else can make the money they're making. The programs aren't going to die off as far as football goes. I don't think schools are going to shutter because guess what? The networks, as much as they have their hand in this, they still want football inventory. So it's not like the Big 12 or the ACC or whatever's left over is just everybody's going to shutter their programs. They're going to have to play somewhere. So, yeah, I think you have to start thinking about the gap being so large that, okay, what does this other thing possibly look like? And you have to at least be investigating that right now. Or there could be people who just are happy for a seat at the table and want to pretend like they have a chance. When right now I think you still kind of do, but you're getting further and further away from that. And if this were to be the case, then, I mean, there's no chance in hell.
The only way to close the gap in that case is to rob Peter to pay Paul. So, like, what you do is, all right, so say you are Clemson and you are mad about the gap, which is, now $100 million a year between you and Alabama, right? And the money that they have. So the only way you can
That's
close...
a little bit more. It's a little bit much.
But, well, I mean, like, if they're going to make $50 million more in TV revenue and 30 or 80 million, so it's $80 million you got to make up. Well, the only way you compete with those resources is to take them from somewhere that you already have. And so, because you can't just go out and create a new thing, so that's where then it starts to hurt everything else because you're like, well, we have to make football work because that's what everybody cares about. And you're like, hey, the swimming pool's out of water. And you're like, well, guess what? Yeah. It's going to stay out of water.
But if they do break off and there is a different deal, there's going to still be TV networks that want to carry the other division, whatever it might be called. And yet again, the separation is there. Eventually, it's a chokehold. Eventually, you just don't get a chance to compete for what is the ultimate of the national title, like a North Dakota State or a South Dakota State have theirs, or Mary Hardin Baylor or Mount Union have theirs. They still celebrate it, but eventually, financially, you just don't have enough. And I think at some point, even though no one's going to just disappear, there will be some programs, instead of opting up, are going to opt even further down because they just can't keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, there would be collateral damage for sure. And I understand that the money that you could make as a different league, so to speak, would not be the money you necessarily make in this. And that might be why some capitulate and they just say, you know what? They're making $100 million more than us competing for the same prize. We see that, but I guess we'd rather just make the Sugar Bowl, or not even do that. Maybe we just fight for the chance to host a first-round game one day, and that's our goal as opposed to it being like the national championship. And look, for some programs, that's already unrealistic in this format to win a national title anyways. I think we understand, but for the most part, they've been able to keep the spirit of college football alive to where everybody, if they feel like they've got that certain setup 1 year, they have a chance. Mm-hmm. When you create a gap to where it's like $100 million and the whole system revolves around paying players, it's just not feasible to think that that's possible any longer. Even if it was a far off, barely twinkling star to begin with, now it's just pitch black. I mean, there's just, you'd have to be acknowledge reality. But maybe just that little carrot dangling is good enough for some people to say, you know what, we'll just take our medicine and we'll make $100 million less just to be a part of the party. And maybe that's what eventually schools decide to do because it's better than the alternative. But yeah, at some point you just have to go, we're not even playing the same game here. And what does it look like
being in an abusive relationship?
But like, at what point, if employment becomes enacted, like we're steadily heading down the path of, and there's conferences making tens of millions of more, well, they're not going to have a hard time paying their players. You, on the other hand, are going to have a bit more of a difficult situation. So what alternative could there possibly be? I think that's something you have to explore, but I think more than anything, you keep fighting for yourself and you see if, kind of like the automatic bias thing, if you dig in your heels and you talk it out, then maybe you can get something a bit more feasible that works for you a bit better than what's being proposed today?
I think what's good is because of the reaction, it's been reported today that because of the negative tone and reaction to the automatic qualifiers or the first-round buys, that now seems to not be extinct, but that thing right now is taking a back seat for trying to figure out the revenue, and that remains to be seen. When we come back, Grayson Grundhoefer, we'll talk to Max Olson about what we just discussed along with what we heard from Chris Pesman, Chris Lowe. Also today, we'll have John Kurtz, Tony Caridi, so much to get to. This is 365 Sports. Ideal MRI in the Central Texas marketplace had someone, I guess it was 2 days ago, came up to me and they said, hey, how much did you say that MRI was at Ideal MRI? It's the same as it was 5-10 years ago when I started talking about them. Whenever they opened up, $497, where most of anything health is rising. Most costs are getting higher. But Ideal MRI is $497. Dr. Rob Maxey, the partners who built this amazing business in Waco, just off I-35 in the Central Texas marketplace, a state-of-the-art technology MRI machine. $497 is how much you'll spend at the most, and maybe less, as they'll help you file what you need when it comes to insurance. And it's every single time when the average is $1,100. IdealMRI.com.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
Don Humidor, your home with a 48-foot walk-in humidor with the elite cigar brands from around the world, including the #1 cigar of the year, Aging Room Cuatro Nicaragua. Plus, they have the great brands like Macanudo and Artur Fuente, Rocky Patel, Aston, and so much more. CBD, great for sore muscles, aches and pains, sleep, Vita Dreams, and anxiety, mild depression, general health and wellness. Their staff very knowledgeable on the subject. If anyone is curious about CBD, ask Carol and Ashley. Don Humidor in the Townwest Shopping Center off Valley Mills in Waco.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Waco Custom Marketplace is your hometown grocery store with a full-service butcher shop and bakery. Hi, this is David Smoak. The butcher shop can take your customized orders for seafood, pork, and poultry and custom cut your favorite steaks from bacon-wrapped fillets, sirloin steaks, bone-in ribeyes, boneless ribeyes, and even prime rib. Cut specifically the way you want, the thickness that you want. They're all delicious. They have Norwegian salmon, mahi-mahi, catfish fillets, sliced ham or turkey, variety of cheese, and several options of sausage links, and even regular jalapeno or cheese snack sticks, fresh chicken breast or whole chickens, sliced bacon, pork chops, and ground beef, marinated beef or chicken fajitas, and always large briskets and tri-tip available, plus fresh vegetables. So the great product, customer service, and tradition continues at Waco Custom Marketplace, a full-service butcher shop and bakery, open Monday through Saturday. The Bauer family, Waco Custom Marketplace, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco, or WacoCustomMarketplace.com.
This is 365 Sports. Text us at 254-339-1122. The text line is sponsored by Riverbend Liquor and Wine, with the most extensive variety of craft beer in Waco. A hidden gem on Lakeshore Drive and 19th Street.
Grayson Grundhoefer, 365 Sports, football analyst, and more. Bearcast co-host joins us on the show this afternoon. Grayson, with the staff that Baylor now has, and it's finally all together, and some haven't been around long enough to do too much of the recruiting, but they're doing all of that. Is this staff, in your opinion, about a half a star tick up of who they're going after, or does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I get what you're saying if you're talking about the guys that they're replacing. I assume that's what you mean.
Yeah.
And if you do mean that,
yeah.
I think that for just kind of looking at the broad picture, right, because I think this recent wave of hiring kind of skews the fact that Baylor also brought in, coaches earlier in the cycle as well, specifically Jake Spavital, who is one that, I think has been a very good hire up to this point. I think ultimately it's going to all come down to what happens on the field for that offense and how quickly the changes are made to go from wide zone to a spread air raid type offense. But I do think there's a lot of reasons for hope there. And I also think there's a lot of reasons for, fans to get very excited. It's much closer to what I think the Baylor fans are used to seeing than what we saw over the past few years. And I think, both offenses can work for a variety of reasons. But I do think when you look at the roster that Baylor has built, I think the offense that Jake Spavital is bringing in is really going to help things there. Now, as far as other hires, I think Keenan Hall has been an absolute home run on the recruiting trail side. That's been an awesome hire. And they've had, kind of a bouncing around type room at the running back coach position. So I think Keenan Hall coming in and really solidifying that, bringing in top recruits, making prospects very interested to attend Baylor, I think is a big deal. And you're seeing that throughout the DFW Metroplex area. He's done a phenomenal job. Now, as far as kind of these most recent hires, it's really tough, right? Because you look and you go, Dennis Johnson, a guy who I think everyone can agree, he seems like a coach that is an absolute rising star, going to have a lot of success in his career. But for whatever reason, the past 2 years, this defensive line has not been to the level that they were in 2021. And it's not exactly all on him by any means, but, and some of it is the talent on the roster. Some of it is some of the older guys not playing to the level that you expected them. But I do think that, this is probably a good thing for both sides as far as Baylor bringing in Inoki Brechterfield and then Dennis Johnson going to the Ravens. I think it gives Baylor a different look. It gives Baylor a guy who is very seasoned and has coached a lot of really, really good defenses and specifically defensive lines. But the biggest thing that I've seen with Brechterfield, just kind of looking through his track record and what he's done, each place he's gone to, he's had an impact very early. You look at Washington last year, not just this year. Last year, they made a big jump from being just terrible up front to being really solid. And then we saw again this year, I mean, their defensive line was good enough for them to make it to a college football playoff, a national championship game. And I know it wasn't all about their defense by any means, but I think you could see them having an impact. You saw their impact in the game against Texas. So I do think he's a very good coach, and he's got history with Dave Aranda during his time at Wisconsin when he was very successful as well. We've seen other hires too. I would call most of the other hires pushes at this point. I think it's hard to really tell, if it's an upgrade, from Coach Cap to Mason Miller, from Christian Robinson and Jamar Chaney. I think those are pretty much a wash. But I think the other ones that I mentioned, I think there's reason to believe that those are upgrades at this time.
Grayson Grunhafer segment brought to you by Richard Carr, Buick GMC Cadillac, your Baylor Bear hotline right here on 365 Sports.
Grayson, you mentioned something about the offense that Jake Spavital is bringing in and the players that they have. Transfers notwithstanding, because obviously he's going to go out and get guys that fit that offense and can run it better. But where do you think they went awry in getting players that fit the old offense? And now that they're changing it, why the guys that they have will fit the new offense?
So, I think that part of this is, Texas high school football, a lot of the programs in Texas run a spread offense. And, I think an area where Baylor's really struggled, at least in the wide zone scheme, was specifically the wide receiver position and the passing game in general. And that comes down to wide receiver. That also comes down to quarterback play. And both of those things were not up to the level that they needed to be. And I do think in Jeff Grimes' offense, there was a lot more asked of both of those positions. And so therefore it took a lot more time and a lot more seasoning for guys to, I think, really get it and really perform it to the level that it needs to be performed at for it to be extremely effective. And so, you look at the 2021 season, and they just ran the ball so well that it kind of overcame some of their deficiencies in the passing game. And they still had, some big passing plays. And a big part of that is, Tyquan Thornton was an older guy. Drew Estrada was an older guy that they had brought in. They had experience at the tight end position. RJ Sneed was an older guy. They just had a bunch of older guys who maybe, maybe they didn't put up huge numbers. Tyquan did, but maybe the other guys didn't put up huge numbers, but they ran the offense at a very high level. Gary Bohannon was able to complete easy throws down the field and just continue to move the chains. But I don't think that kind of offense was something that was going to continue to be as successful as it was that year, just specifically because the defense was so good. So now once the defense wasn't to that level where it's a top 5, top 10 defense, and it's more like, a top 25, and then this year, it bottomed out, but you saw that the offense had to take on more of a load. And I just don't think that offense was conducive for that. And I think we saw it at times last year for sure. And even in 2022, I think, it reared its ugly head at times then too, especially at the end of the year. So I do think this offense is probably easier to learn, easier to grasp, easier to pick up for the offensive line, for the receivers, for the quarterback as well. And I think just for all those reasons, I do have some optimism that they're going to be more explosive in that regard.
Grayson, do you worry about Dave Aranda spreading himself too thin?
I'm not. And Craig, I know you've mentioned this a couple times, and I completely understand, the thought process of, okay, so he's going to be the head coach, basically the defense coordinator, and he's going to coach linebackers. That sounds like a little too much. And maybe I think at some point we're kind of saying it as maybe we're emphasizing too much that, oh yeah, he's going to be with the linebackers the whole time, but then he's also going to be the defense coordinator, and then he's going to be the head coach. I think more so it's going to be his fingerprints are going to be all over what the linebackers do, specifically in the off season and leading up to fall camp and during the season. And I do think he's going to have a huge role in that regard, but I don't think this means he's only going to be with the linebackers for the entire time. I really don't see that. I think his emphasis is going to be on the entire defense, but yes, there will be a focus on the linebackers specifically now. As far as the head coaching stuff, I think this is why you bring in a guy like Jake Spavital. This is why you bring in a guy like Jared Anderson. You're bringing in guys who have a lot of experience, whether it's as offensive coordinators or Jake Spavital as a head coach as well. So I think this was an opportunity for Dave to find some guys who he really trusted to go out there and make the offense successful and just allow them to really, excel in that regard and give them a lot on their plate, but also understand that, hey, this is for the betterment of the team. This is what we need to do so that I can come over here, help this defense, focus on what I'm really good at, and then allow these guys to kind of take the reins on the offensive side. And I think because of that, it's going to allow him to not spread himself too thin.
All right, a quick timeline, and then we appreciate your time today, Grayson. Spring drills will start in a couple of weeks. What then can coaches do, or can people or prospects visit during that time? Can you kind of iron that out for me?
Yeah, so there's actually prospects visiting right now. I mean, there's been some prospects already. 2026 quarterback Quinn Murphy, he visited this week. Another quarterback out of El Paso, Jake Fetty, he visited. So guys are visiting, and that's going to continue during spring ball. It's, guys like to come and watch practice and actually see what Baylor's doing, especially with the new offense coordinator in there. They're going to want to see kind of, what the offense looks like. So that's kind of happening during this timeline. You mentioned spring practice starts March 19th. The spring game is April 20th. They'll have visitors all throughout that period, including for the spring game. And then the weekend after the spring game is actually when Baylor's going to have their first official visit of the year. The hope is that that's not a very big one. The hope is that there's just going to be a few guys who can't make it to their summer official visits. They'll have those guys come on that April 26th date, I believe April 27th, something along those lines. They'll be there for that one. So that's kind of the timeline we have right now for the next month and a half. Spring ball starts. the spring game, and then first official visit at the end of April. So things are going to ramp up pretty quickly, and recruiting is going to be very important throughout this entire time period to sell guys kind of on the vision that they're heading towards, and also sell guys on taking an official visit to Baylor as well. That's a big one too.
Thank you, Grayson. Appreciate your time on Fridays around 3:45. Brought to you by Richard Carr Buick GMC Cadillac. When we come back, Max Olson, theathletic.com, will join us. Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak, and I'm David Smoak. Jack McKenzie running the mothership, and this is 365 Sports. Waco Custom Marketplace, full-service butcher shop, full-service bakery. Every single day they're open, Monday through Saturday, and they even have a drive-through or drive-around coffee shop if you want to get yourself a cup of coffee or something they have inside the store. There's a window off to the side, and you can walk in the door like a hometown grocery store, get your cart, go up and down a couple of different aisles and get some knickknacks, from pasta to canned goods to seasonings and marinades and much more. Fresh baked bread and kolaches every single day, plus other sweets and treats in the bakery. And the butcher shop, you can order what you want, how much you want, pork, poultry, also seafood and beef. Waco Custom Marketplace, your hometown grocery store, the Bauer family, 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco.
Cars priced right, both day and night. At Richard Carr in Texas. Trucks built for you, red, white, and blue. At Richard Carr in Texas. Cars that zoom with lots of room. At Richard Carr in Texas. Count on us, a dealer to trust. At Richard Carr in Waco, Texas.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at AllianceBankTexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student-athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student-athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student-athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow at GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student-athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
Riverbend Liquor and Wine now has 2 locations to serve you. The original on Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street and the brand new spot in downtown Waco at 600 Franklin Avenue. If you're looking for the best in craft beers or local Texas bourbons, then the original is the place to be. And for the latest trends and online phenomenons, head downtown to the Franklin location. Either way, you're going to get the same great variety, customer service, and speedy experience. Check out both locations on their Facebook and Instagram pages. Riverbend Liquor and Wine, Lakeshore Drive at North 19th Street, and now downtown on Franklin Avenue.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Max Olson, theathletic.com with us. And I absolutely want to make sure we jump into the Lance Leipold story, which was incredible. Max wrote, it was in theathletic.com, I believe it was yesterday. And he joins us on 365 Sports. So Max, there's this floating of ideas, the automatic qualifiers, the first-round buys, and it appears now that more of the focus is on the revenue of how it's going to be broken down. 58, 31, and 10 or 11 percentage based on the conferences and Power 5 Notre Dame. Do you feel like that percentage is fair?
No, it's obviously not fair. I think that it's been interesting to see the reporting on this for the past couple of weeks. I think that clearly there's an implication here. It's hard not to I understand that with a new deal coming up and with the death of Pac-12, a lot of things are maybe worthy of being reconsidered in terms of format and stuff like that. But I guess my question is what is the or else here? Is the or else that if the Big Ten and the SEC don't get these concessions that they're going to take their football and go off and start their own playoff? I mean, what are we what's the threat here? I guess I'm very curious about that part of it because it's obvious that that Sankey and Petiti would see this as a moment where they could strengthen their position with the playoff in 26 and going forward. Everyone gets that. We can all see what this is, and it just kind of strikes me as kind of gross. I mean, it's not just the automatic bids and the idea of confirming that if these leagues deserve 3 and other leagues deserve 2. That itself is just it's a big reach. But then for the money to be so out of whack, it tells you that this is a pretty strong power play, and that the moment I think a couple months ago or a month ago, where the SEC and the Big Ten were talking about kind of being more in partnership and working together. I think we all should have read that as a sign that they are going to start politically operating like this. And I'm not sure there's a lot of people out there, guys, that read the updates on this and are excited about where it's going.
Yeah, Max, that's a great point. Are they really, we've talked to several people that believe that they're not going to let the other conferences go on their way, but nothing that happens just seems like that is at least not in part of their minds. And I wonder if college football understands, the leaders of those conferences and the leaders at the television networks know that this is a regional sport. If you just cut off part of the country, that they're not going to like that overall. I don't know if that's hit them yet.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think it's just kind of an opportune moment here because you've got obviously Jim Phillips is trying to do whatever he can to hold the ACC together in the long term. The Big 12 has signed a grant of rights. Obviously, those members are stuck together here through the end of the decade. But I think it's, I think that you're seeing the SEC and the Big Ten viewing this as a chance to really dominate and be the only important conferences in the sport. And I just think there's probably a lot of people, especially in our part of the country, who look at that and say, is that really good is that really a good thing? I mean, you remember when the folks rolled out the 12-team proposal in the first place. The idea was that this was healthier for the sport. And, that 14-team playoff, the shape that it's taking right now, we'll see when this all gets decided here in the next month. But the direction it's heading in, I don't think anyone's looking at that and saying, that's a really healthy thing for the future of the sport.
Max, I know that Brett Yormark and the Big 12 are going to try to do whatever they possibly can, but it's kind of and I don't know how much of a question this is, but at some point, it's one thing when Ohio State's already making, $100 million more than Houston, but they've got the same type of access. If they're all of a sudden, making $250 million more, and they've got even better access, at what point, if you're the Big 12, is it I guess it'll just be interesting to see how you balance access versus playing a game that's clearly already rigged to begin with. And what's the better option for you,
Right. And I think when it comes, look, I know we're in a period right now where it's should we even call it Power 5 anymore or Power 4 or whatever? What's the point? Should we still call them Group of 5 and all that kind of stuff? There's a difference between the perception piece and the money piece. If the money is if we're going to continue to, if we're going to go in these directions where instead of these leagues splitting the money equally, there's a huge difference, then obviously that's going to grow the gap. That's between the TV deals and the CFP money. Then those programs in those two conferences, are going to have a significant advantage every year. And what does that lead to, guys? That leads to schools wanting to bail from the ACC to go be in those two leagues. So, I mean, it just kind of keeps perpetuating the problem.
Max, as far as the backlash of the first round buys that would be guaranteed, that seemed to die quickly.
I mean, yeah, it seems like it. If that's something that was too far and just a little concession to distract people, then maybe that's what they were looking for. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that for that to be the automatically top two spots, that just doesn't make a ton of sense. And, I think if you go look at, I've kind of tried to model this out a little bit over the past decade. It's imprecise, obviously, if you try to look at what the 14-team playoff would have been over the past decade, because obviously conference membership has changed a ton. And, if you use 24 membership on these past scenarios, you look at it, guys, there's some years when, the SEC would have only had Alabama and Oklahoma, essentially. You know what I mean? There's some years where they wouldn't have had, 6 teams in a 14-team playoff and stuff. So I see why they would want to guarantee bids. I can see why they would want to try to convince the Big 12 and the ACC that, look, if we give you a similar number, then that's a better thing for your conference than what you currently have. But man, I think it's very clear to everyone when you start putting dollars on it, what a gap this creates.
Max, spring football is starting, and that spring transfer portal window is, I'm sure you're just dreading it, because then your life goes away again for 3-4 weeks. But before
I'm not dreading it. My wife and my son are dreading it, but I'm not. I mean, it's coming.
But is there anything intriguing coming up in the spring, that you've kind of got your eye on in particular, about maybe some position battles or some schools that are trying to make a move?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few schools that you look at and you're very curious. Are they looking to, make some moves in this spring window? Obviously, you've seen some programs like Ole Miss and Oregon that are making big runs at a playoff and title run here, and so they've added a ton in December, January. Will they be looking to pick up a couple more kind of final pieces here to have a championship caliber team? You've got the quarterback situation at Ohio State, where you've got 5 scholarship guys that are all very talented between, let's see if I can name them all: Will Howard, Devin Brown, Lincoln Kienholz, Julian Sayin, and Aaron Nolan. 2 of those guys are true freshmen. One of them is a redshirt freshman. So how does that room kind of shake out? If Will Howard's the guy, as you'd expect, does that lead a few other guys to feel like maybe they need to make a move? And then there's some of these like Auburn or maybe even Michigan, where you're kind of wondering, okay, do they like what they have at QB, or are they going to be looking for someone? So I think there will be a bunch of those, and with the way things are right now, since we've suspended the repeat transfer rules and stuff, I think you're going to see a lot of tampering in April, as we did last year, and potentially, more big names. I mean, it's easy to forget, like a guy like Keon Coleman went in the portal right when that opened last April. I think we'll see kind of big impact guys pop up and try to make moves to make some more money.
Max, you had a nice piece on Lance Leipold, who just got a new contract there with the Kansas Jayhawks. And for those who haven't checked it out, how Lance Leipold became college football's most fearless program builder. Take us into that article and your thoughts on, obviously, what he's got going on right now at Kansas and what they're hoping he's going to have cooking here in the future as well.
Yeah, appreciate you bringing it up. This is a story that I've started reporting really towards the end of the 2022 season, and have just been spending a lot of time visiting Lance Leipold, visiting Kansas over the past year, and really kind of trying to just get a better sense of how do they do it there. Everyone kind of knows the reputation. They know, he's pulling off a miracle at Kansas. He had a pretty successful run in the MAC at Buffalo. He won a bunch of national titles at Wisconsin Whitewater. But, I think the how of it, the process of what makes him so successful, what makes their culture so successful, it was really fun to dive into that and talk to players and coaches who've been with him at all 3 schools, and talk to coaches who are involved in his rise through the coaching ranks, because this is a guy that, took a while to become a head coach. He's someone that has done a pretty incredible job everywhere he's been. And, I think you can't, I think more than 25 interviews for this one. Probably could write a book after all those, but it was hard to find someone who would say a bad word about the guy. I think he's just so impressive as a leader and as a program builder. And, guys, for when you think about the past decade before he got there, Kansas losing his program in FBS and just how pitiful those Big 12 games were year after year, to see them actually compete now in such a quick turnaround is pretty incredible. And, if you look at what they've got with Jalen Daniels healthy, with Devin Neal back, with 26 other guys with starting experience, I think there's a real possibility here in this changing conference that Kansas can compete for a Big 12 title. And that's a testament to, no matter who you hire there, I don't think anybody would have expected that by year 4, we're saying that about the Kansas Jayhawks.
He has history as a part-time cop, police academy, group home for delinquent boys. This story, Max, seriously, you've written a lot of good ones, but this one here is phenomenal. If people want to dig into Leipold, share the story about when he was at Nebraska under Solich.
Yeah.
And they go through the firing of Solich, and they hire Bill Callahan, and we know the disastrous length of time that coaching search took. And then what did Peterson say to him?
So Lance Leipold, he was at Nebraska Omaha for many years, and as he was approaching 40, he felt like he started needing to move up a little bit more. So he took a recruiting job at Nebraska, and he was there for the end of the Frank Solich era. He got to really kind of see the demise there and witness just kind of how dysfunctional a once great program at the highest level can be. As a guy coming from Wisconsin Whitewater, had never really been at that big of a stage of college football. And, certainly he was very soured by his experience at Nebraska at that time. And, he's actually somebody that behind the scenes, that coaching search went 41 days, which nowadays would probably get an AD fired in the middle of it, right? That's just impossible that a coaching search could be running that long nowadays. When we just had a cycle where these things go for 3 days. So he actually had a connection. He worked with Bill Callahan at Wisconsin, actually helped connect Bill Callahan to Nebraska's administration and kind of gauge his interest and help save the search after a bunch of people had turned them down. So Steve Peterson, the old AD at Nebraska, who's pretty reviled by the fan base now, he pops by Lance's office, and Lance is expecting Steve to thank him for the role he played in finally connecting Bill Callahan to Nebraska and helping make that hire possible. And Steve asked him to go into Frank Solich's office and go clean the office, go wipe down the boards and dust the office because nobody had been in there in 40 days or so. And Lance told me that he went to Nebraska's DFO and said he can kiss my ass, and he went home. He went home for the day and basically decided I need to leave this place as soon as possible, and went back to Nebraska Omaha to be their OC.
Yeah, outside of actually detonating a nuke in Lincoln, is there anything worse Steve Peterson could have done to that athletic department?
No. Yeah. We did a story on that search a couple of years ago, and unfortunately we're not able to get in touch with him. He's out of the business now, but very for Nebraska fans of a certain age, he's a very memorable figure in the decline of that program.
I wish you could have seen Smokey at Cowboys training camp when Bill Callahan got their offensive line job, and he walked by, and Smokey just shot him a death stare.
Yeah, he dropped by.
Nice guy, but
when I was in Tyler, he dropped by the radio station. It was pretty cool. But man, that was just such a just awful. That it could not have gone
wrong
worse.
guy at the wrong time. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Craig, you mentioned you did a combo story on Mac Brown and what built how they were able to get to Oklahoma, then past Oklahoma and win a national title, and how that was all put together too. You're part of that tandem?
Yeah. Sam Conn and I did a story on Texas Junior days and, back in the day. And, when they kind of looking back on that period when they really had it rolling, especially after they won the national title, where I don't know how much you guys remember this, but back in, the spring, they could bring in a group for, very exclusive invite only junior day and, pick up a dozen commits in one weekend. And it was when we were kind of just looking back on this time when Texas was really the dominant power in that state in recruiting, and Mac Brown was kind of making all the rules when it came to who he wanted to take. And so, yeah, talked to a lot of coaches and players from that time. And, look, there's that you look back on it now and it seems like a lot of time has passed since recruiting worked that way. It was very old fashioned in a lot of ways, but I think there's also Texas fans who look at that time and say, that Texas probably should have won more national titles in that span. And that maybe all that the early commitments they took that didn't pan out is the reason why they didn't win more. So I think it's an interesting look back on a time when Texas really kind of changed the game in recruiting with the way Mac Brown was doing junior days.
Max, thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend, and good luck as you prep for the hellacious part of transfer portal opening up not that far around the corner. Max Olson, theathletic.com. So part of the story about Lance Leipold is he went to Wisconsin Whitewater, which, of course, has had an unbelievable history. They thought he gets hired instead of who was the favorite within the program, Polinski. So he ends up, Leipold's car was keyed. Polinski's Lexus was vandalized on 3 different occasions. Nobody at that school, the fan base, donors, etc., seemed to be happy with the hire. And all he did was go on to win multiple national titles, I think 4 out of 5 years, and put up a stupid record. But he's been through it all. He is, and I've got this impression, he just is a no-nonsense guy, but has a little bit of a sense of humor, which is still very unique.
And he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder given some of the weird things he's been through, clearly. I mean, you heard what Max said there, about the story. And he was one of, as soon as he said it, you don't have a custodial staff that you could call up and say at Nebraska, hey, we got a new coach coming in. You guys mind going in there and giving that room a spritz? Because that's what, to walk down to a coach's office and say, hey, will you go clean an office that's never going to end well.
And he said, you can kiss my ass. And I love it. I'm glad that he did. I'm glad that he did.
I'm surprised. Fans and media usually nail every coaching hire when it's announced, Usually have a totally great grip on all of those. No, sometimes you have backlash and it's warranted, and sometimes you don't. I think we're going to find that at Texas A&M here pretty soon, of whether the backlash was warranted or not, whether Mike Elko ends up being the better hire than Mark Stoops would have been for them. But, yeah, we've seen fan revolts, and sometimes they can interrupt the process. But I think Wisconsin Whitewater definitely made the right choice and benefited greatly from it, and they're as strong as they are today because in part of that choice. So, yeah, that's a nice little memory trip for Lance Leipold in his career, and I'm sure there was some that possibly balked at Kansas hiring him. I don't know. I don't quite remember. Nobody was caring about Kansas football at the point when he was hired. So, anybody taking the job was like a breath of fresh air.
It's Mother Teresa to them. You want this? Really? All right.
Yeah, sure. Here, we'll support you. And he's done a great job. And I know there's big expectations this year and now a new contract and facility upgrades and all that. The expectation is to get bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better. And I think the longer he hangs around, then that will come in time. But they definitely got something this year bubbling up that could be pretty good. We'll see.
By the way, I mentioned Polinski. He was the AD at Wisconsin Whitewater who gave at least Leipold a chance to interview for the job. He was not the favorite. There was somebody already on staff, and that's why Polinski's Lexus was vandalized, and then Leipold's car was keyed. And they eventually took down the mighty Mount Union 37-game winning streak and eventually ended up winning multiple national titles before going to Buffalo. And there was also a story that, I don't know where, I think it was at Buffalo, and somebody was coming to the town to play them, and they showed up with one of those 18-wheeler equipment trucks. And Buffalo, I believe, was using some kind of a U-Haul truck, like a box truck. And that was something the little things like that, not so much how much more money he was going to make or whatever, was very, very tedious on the little things that could lead to players thinking, man, they actually do care, whether it's the meals, the weight room, whatever it might have been. When we come back, we're not done. We got a lot to get to. John Kurtz covers Kansas State, Kansas City Network also today. Tony Caridi, voice of West Virginia on the Neil Brown extension. He sat down, in fact, yesterday, one-on-one with Neil Brown. Paul on Chris Lowe in that article about Nick Saban, Alabama, and more. And this is 365 Sports.
Richard Carr, Buick, GMC, Cadillac, they are the people that you can count on for great customer service and for great deals on a variety of different vehicles, whether they be new or pre-owned. And right now, they're celebrating 25 years of business in Waco this month. And to celebrate, they are offering mad savings all month long. It's a mad march over at Richard Carr Motors, and right now you can save thousands a part of Mad March on GMC Sierra SLT crew cabs. Qualified buyers will receive 1.9% financing for 72 months, and if you're a military or first responder, you can also save an additional $500 as well. And when you purchase a car or truck during this crazy month of March, there's a little bit of a background as far as all the activity going on, not only with hoops and the madness that comes with that, but also with the anniversary savings going on at Richard Carr. Get a 65-inch 4K TV with a car or truck purchase during their anniversary event. And you can find big savings all over the lot. Over 90 highly inspected used cars and trucks. 100% credit approval, always the goal over at Richard Carr. They say yes when others say no. So go help celebrate Richard Carr with their 25th anniversary and save thousands on new vehicles. Also, perhaps get yourself a 65-inch 4K TV to really celebrate this mad month of March. But go and check out all of those great deals and the great customer service and great people over at Richard Carr, in business for 25 years here in Central Texas and having built a reputation over that time as the people you can count on for your automotive needs. Log on to richardcarr.com today. Call now or go see them now off Highway 6, the Imperial exit.
Samantha Duvall, TexasBeefHouse.com with me, David Smoak. And tell you what, you guys keep rolling along. You do have yet another date, correct, for an online and live auction?
Yes, our next online and live auction will be Thursday, April 25th.
We've discussed how this has been unique and how people have reacted to it. Has that momentum continued as you've done more?
Yes, it's kind of half and half. We'll have a good amount of people there that are from the area, and then we have probably 40% that we ship out. And everybody that I've delivered locally to has talked about how much fun they had, and they want to know when the next one's going to be. We've gotten great feedback from the people that we've shipped to. They're all just so excited about this event, and they can't wait for the next one to happen.
Premium grade East Texas beef. Customers don't have to go out and buy their beef. TexasBeefHouse.com, from their family and their ranch to your plate. TexasBeefHouse.com.
Automatic Chef Canteen is a full-service micro-market vending and office coffee provider with state-of-the-art vending equipment, a wide variety of products, and offering custom-fitted micro-market vending office coffee solutions for your employee break room. You want a full break room solution and a workplace oasis? Well, Automatic Chef Canteen, locally owned and operated for over 50 years in Central Texas, also includes in-house mechanics on call 24/7 for fast, reliable service and maintenance. Automatic Chef Canteen, 6900 Imperial Drive in Waco, or online at automaticchefcanteen.com.
Our good friend Brad Boozer, Boozer's Jewelers here at 365 Sports. Now, Brad, people who watch and listen to our show know I'm a double-time customer for you, engagement ring and wedding band, and you guys do that great, but that's not all you do at Boozer's Jewelers.
Absolutely. And I always like to say, it's a new year. It's a great way to start the year out. Go through your old jewelry. Go through your wife's jewelry box. Go through anything you're maybe not wearing, something that's broken, something that you're not using. We do a massive amount of custom work. We can take your old jewelry, old diamonds, old watches, and we can convert it into something special for you and make a one-of-a-kind piece of jewelry. And if that's not something you're interested in, a great thing is we can turn that into cash. So we buy gold, we buy diamonds, we'll buy Rolex watches, any kind of heirloom jewelry, anything that's maybe passed down to you.
Boozer's Jewelers, where do they find you, Brad?
We're at 1025 North Valley Mills Drive, right on the corner of Lake Air Drive and Valley Mills with the big clock on the corner.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. Enjoying the show? Hit the like button and subscribe.
All right, Dustin, we're going to get to your question with one of our guests coming up here in a minute, and John Kurtz from the Kansas City Sports Network. But tomorrow, I believe, is Kim Coulter's birthday. And Kim, playing a round of golf, had some friends come into town. Now, Kim is a rabid, passionate, and sometimes, a little bit crazy when it comes to being a Texas Tech fan. He was playing golf with Hans and Rick. And look at this picture of Mr. Texas Tech. This is, you can get along if you're a Tech fan and a UT fan. And these are buddies. In fact, one of them a roommate of Earl Campbell's back when he was at Austin at the University of Texas. So Kim Coulter, happy birthday, a day early, and there we are.
Happy birthday, Kim. Love Kim.
That's what eliminated the electricity in this building, knowing that Kim played golf with the University of Texas.
If that and just knowing that John Kurtz was going to come on the show.
Yeah.
2 days. He balanced us out.
He did, because we popped him up.
We've dealt with some weird things in our year, Smokey, but a breaker going out in the middle of 2 shows, that's a new one.
Especially when one you couldn't get fixed for a while because it was outside in the panel.
Yeah.
We're joined by John Kurtz. Appreciate John. Covers the hell out of the Big 12 and much, much more. John, what are your thoughts? Again, new things out there today. Well, we're going to want the first round buys. You're not going to get that. Okay, well, we're going to want a little bit more money. We knew that. How much is too much? And is the Big 12 or the Big 10 and the SEC just continuing to be like a bad relationship already before it starts?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys having me on. I mean, I tell you what, it was sobering to read that article, even though most of it is stuff that we already knew. Like, there is some good reporting there. I'm not trying to run down the reporting that Ross Dellinger did at all, and he does an excellent job of just laying it all out the plainest terms right now of what's happening. But, like, we knew they were going to ask for more money, a higher cut of it. And, well, I initially thought, well, hey, that number actually seems different than what Thamel said the other day. I went back and cross-checked that. I was like, no, I think I got my wires crossed there. It is pretty similar. It would be a $10 to $12 million difference per team per year from teams in the Big 12 and ACC and the Big 10 and the SEC. So, like, even that is kind of something that we already knew. But when you float it in the terms of, like, hey, for the conferences, it's going to be a $300 million difference between those, and they're going to add even more, something I hadn't totally considered. They're going to add even more to that, to the disparity by just having more teams in there and winning more games because they're going to get $3 to $5 million a pop for all of that. It's like, man, I mean, that is going to be tough to compete with. And the other thing I think that's happened is, like, this week we got the Dartmouth story, which, you might say, well, how is, like, Ivy League men's basketball really affecting all of us? Well, I mean, it's another reminder of where we're headed. And eventually, and I think it's going to be in the nearer future than what we originally thought, you're going to have to be paying the athletes directly from the schools. And now if you're a Big 10 or SEC school and you're taking in an extra, we'll say like $15 to $20 million from the college football playoff over your peers in the other 2 conferences, and then you've got the extra like $30 million from your TV contract that you're taking in, it's a heck of a surplus to be able to be doling out to players when now NIL is the most important thing out there. I mean, I can just tell you from being around K-State circles, what I'm hearing about just K-State and the league. And if you follow, guys like Trilly Donovan right now, who's so good with college basketball, he's really talking up, hey, this coaching cycle is going to be all about NIL, like what schools have the most NIL money, because it was important last year, but I can tell you the tenor on that has completely changed to where it's like, 90% of the deal right now in recruiting. So all of that together, you just start looking at the future and you're like, man, I mean, that gets pretty tough to compete if you're a Big 12 or an ACC school, or obviously anybody else, because I think before there was this assumption that coaches would leave because, hey, they're going to have more money from the TV contracts. They already have more money. There's the prestige of it. Like, they're going to be able to pull coaches. And with the exception of Jed Fish, we just have not seen a lot of that with head coaches leaving the Big 12. But when it's like a more direct route to be able to do that, paying players, if we're going to get to the point where the schools are doing that, and now we're seeing how they're going to build that financial machine and financial advantage. So, it's sobering. I thought one of the most interesting quotes from that entire piece was an admin from the Big 12 or ACC saying, like, basically, like, I'm paraphrasing here, but like, do we call their bluff? Like, do we tell them no on this and see if they'll actually leave? That was a pretty fascinating bit of insight to me, because they've got to make this, what the article said, by the end of next week, get this all figured out. So, I mean, you think about what you're mulling if you're Brett Yormark and an AD in one of those offices right now. Like, your future is on the line here, and you got to think, like, do we tell them no and risk just cutting this off early? In 2 years, we will be quite literally playing in like a different league from all these guys. Or do we kind of take the breadcrumbs that they're handing us and hang on to whatever we can here for now and let them kind of dictate this power structure? a pretty fascinating decision that I think is going to come here pretty soon.
John, I'm just kind of leaning towards maybe they should do it. Just say it. Like, is that if at least if they break off, you know what their intent was the whole time, and you move on with your life, I guess, as opposed to constantly having to try to, plan out different scenarios of what life is going to be like in the next decade.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like when I was first approaching this, and up until recently, when I had been thinking about it, I was like, yeah, I mean, it sucks, but you just got to do it and try and cling to as much relevancy with it as you can, and take what you can get. And we're just here. There's nothing you can do. Toothpaste is out of the tube, but it is becoming like more and more frustrating. Especially, I mean, the first round buys. The automatic buys thing was just such a crazy power grab to try and get that, to be able to preserve your conference championship game, to get that money attached with that, and just such a, that really got called out by all corners of the college football world and national reporters and stuff, which I thought was good. And now obviously it seems like they're backing off that because of the pushback. But, more stuff like that starts to happen, and you start looking at the reality of this. You're like, I mean, it's just hard for me to see a world where you're not just going to be a feeder system for them, when it comes to talent and coaches too, but especially the talent and players and all that. Like, maybe it is better to just cut the cord early on and try and carve out your own niche as whatever you're going to be. You will have a fan base, obviously, of all of the schools that are going to be involved in this that would not be in your quote unquote super league or whatever. And maybe they're, a lot of the people that just really loved college football for what college football was will gravitate a little bit more toward you, and you can still, I don't know what exactly it would look like, and it is a little depressing to think about, but maybe this gets you more of a head start on like figuring out exactly what that is and how you can brand that and market that, and just what you can have that would be different than what would maybe be a little bit more corporate kind of a college football super league thing. And this would like maintain some of the like idiosyncrasies that we loved about, that we all have loved about college football and college athletics here. I don't know. It's a really tough decision. It's above my pay grade. I'm glad that I'm not the one having to make those decisions, but I can certainly see the logic in it, much more so than before. And maybe some of it is just being presented with the reality of it, right? Like it was easy a year ago when you kind of could see all this coming, but you weren't totally staring it all in the face. And it's like, okay, well, everything still feels relatively normal in the space that I'm operating in now. And now it's here, and you're actually like looking at it and you're kind of like, man, this does suck. Like this is rough. And so it can kind of change what your attitude is when you actually get there.
John, the Big 12 made like some forever enemies. Like you count them on less than a hand last year with all the Pac-12, just people that got embarrassed. And so there's like an anti-Big 12 rhetoric because they got embarrassed because of the way kind of things unfolded and their certain stance on it. And there's obviously some fan bases like Oregon State, Washington State, who are kind of angry because they wish they would have been invited already. So I've seen a lot of this. Well, all this is a result of the Big 12 breaking apart the Pac-12. Am I missing like 10 chapters here that I guess occurred that I'm not aware of? Because I'm 100% positive the Big 12 is not at the root of all of this turning into what it is into right now, much less their devouring of the Pac, because after all, there were more moves to the Pac after the Big 12 made their move. So, or alongside that. So I don't know. I don't know how much you've seen of that, but I don't understand the Big 12 is at the root cause of this whole thing.
Well, believe me, I get some of it. I mean, I did my live show on Wednesday night and was getting a little bit of that from an Ohio State fan of all places, kind of coming in and saying, hey, like this is karma for the Big 12, tearing down the Pac-12, that this is coming back around and now your conference is going to be irrelevant. It could not be more misguided and off base. I mean, let's go back to what started this whole latest round. That was obviously the Big 12 getting the wool pulled over its eyes with Texas and Oklahoma. But even if you want to go before that, let's go back to, Nebraska, Texas A&M, Mizzou, Colorado that all left and everything that was happening there. Like people were trying to pull apart the Big 12 over a decade ago. I mean, it's been a long time that the realignment winds have been blowing, and it's always been involving the Big 12, with the Big 12 generally not in a position of power. So after a couple of rounds of being picked over, they punched back a little bit in a situation where it was that, kill or be killed. And it's ridiculous to pin much of the blame on that. I mean, the Big 12 was there waiting for the four corner schools, but the real key to it was that
the Big Ten wound up taking Oregon and Washington, and that was a huge part of it, along with, obviously, a pretty incompetent commissioner of the Pac-12, who, by the way, I would highly encourage everybody to read John Wilner's latest piece, where he has some great sourcing on George Kliavkoff still taking zero responsibility for anything that happened there, which is pretty hilarious and indicative, I think, of his level of leadership. But yeah, there were so many other factors that contributed to it, and the Big 12 of anybody should not be blamed because it has lived 9 lives. People have tried to kill the Big 12 so many times. I don't know. That to me is just a really short-sighted. That's probably more an indication of how we all just can't think beyond, the last news cycle and the last thing that happened and remember anything in context or have discussions with levels of nuance. I think that's kind of like the sort of Twitter internet culture that we're all living in now, where that narrative comes from.
Yeah, it's the Big 12 is like the person that gets bullied all the time, and eventually they survive and they get tougher. That doesn't mean they're going to beat up the bully, but they're going to fight back, and they've done that multiple times.
How dare you fight back?
Yeah, well, wait a minute. You're not allowed to do that. No, screw you. We're not just going to have you beat us to death every single time, even though they understand what their weaponry might be or clout might be, whatever that score might be. They're just not going to lay down and take it.
I think, like I said at the beginning, I think it's just some hurt feelings from a particular corner. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, John, because I've seen a lot of that rhetoric, and I was just curious about that. But anyways, fellas.
Paul?
Yeah, John, I did want to talk a little Kansas State basketball with you because things did go awry this year for them. And it started with Naquan Tomlin, and we had you on and talked about that whole situation, which still has no clarity for fans or people covering it, and has created probably some unnecessary tension with Jerome Tang and the leadership there. And you've seen that maybe come out a little bit more in Jerome Tang this year than you would have in years past. What is your assessment of where things stand between him and the university and just moving forward in what will be next season, since the NCAA tournament seems unlikely without a tournament win?
Yeah, well, I'm going to do this because it's a little cathartic for me. Naquan Tomlin's last 5 games, 28-7, 20-5, 21-8, 16-7, 17-3, shooting like 37% from 3-point range. It's kind of infuriating. They had that, and they had Quez Glover, who I think was going to be a really key piece of the backcourt, who never played. He played like a minute of an exhibition game, hurt his knee, got all the way back, recovered, and then hurt it again a couple days before he was set to play for the first time this year, right before conference play. A guy that was committed to BYU at one point in time. We see the season that they're having, and there were some NIL issues that forced him to back out there. So I say all that just to set the, I feel like Jerome Tang's taken a lot of shots, and some of it is self-inflicted this year, but people are really wanting to pile on because of how much of a star he was last year, how much bravado there was from the K-State fan base going into this year. But, man, we're talking about taking an NBA draft pick off of his roster, who I just rattled off what he's doing heading into the tournament for Memphis right now. Like, they had a tournament roster put together. So I would just say everybody needs to chill a little bit on the grandiose statements about what Jerome Tang is as a coach. He was 100% going to be in the tournament again this year had he not had a bunch of things out of his control go about as poorly as possible this year. Now, I'm not saying some of the drama that's come along with this season that he's totally faultless in all of that, but I just want to clear the air for a minute on all of that. As far as the relationship between him and the university, I mean, it definitely seems like it has calmed down some from where it was at, where there was all the concern about the president. I do believe that he and the president have met again since then. There was one clip, I'm trying to remember what game it was. I think it was BYU. When they beat BYU, and he went up into the crowd to do his, normal, hang out with the students thing, and he walked right past Richard Linton and actually, kind of dapped him up, gave him a little hug on the way into the crowd. I mean, who knows what exactly you want to make of that, but it seems like maybe the fence has been mended a bit. I think the bottom line when it comes to, the coaching carousel this time of year and what's going to happen with the future of Tang is really everybody seems everything I continue to hear is everybody across the country is so focused on NIL right now because they're realizing just how important it is, that it is 90% of recruiting, and you've got to have your NIL game in place. And K-State has done a complete, maybe 180 is the wrong way to phrase it, but they have gone all in on it in the last like 6 months. That tone has really shifted from like, hey, we want to do this, but we also want to make sure like our Hearn Fund donations, we have that stuff in place for facilities or whatever else it's going to be to, oh no, we need to get everybody on board to donate everything to NIL. Like that's what it's going to cost. And, we may need like $12, $13 million to field championship football and basketball teams if we want to have the type of season that we had, not this past athletic year, but the last one with an Elite Eight, the Big 12 championship. So I think they've fully realized that, and they're doing everything they can behind the scenes to give Jerome Tang everything he would need with that. And I think that is probably just going to outweigh everything else so much more in terms of importance moving forward with coaching jobs right now. It's definitely the feeling that I get from everything I have heard about what's going on in the industry and at K-State right now. So, because of that, I'm relatively optimistic, but man, I hate to say it. I know I keep referencing him, but like Trilly Donovan is so plugged into everything in college basketball. And I keep reading him say he expects it to be the craziest coaching carousel that we've seen in recent memory. So when he says that, I'm kind of like, who knows? Like all bets are off as far as what's going to happen there, but I'm not in panic mode like I was, one of the last times I talked to you back in January, whenever all that was going down.
John, next time that we see you and you don't give me a firm handshake and we catch it on video, we're going to put it up on social media and act like you are being distant to us. I've seen this back and forth with you and KU fans, and I get it. It's a fierce rivalry and there's arrogance in one sport and arrogance in the other, whatever. But I mean, my God. There's going to be eventually we're going to eliminate handshakes after any sporting event because of how sometimes this can turn into. And there are some coaches who have absolutely ignored the person that just beat them.
I mean, it is crazy. We went through a whole cycle of it for an entire day, and I thought it was done. And then shout out to Tim Fitzgerald. Tim Fitzgerald comes up with an actual it looked like a local TV reporter who had gotten the angle of the actual handshake between Self and Tang and Lawrence because we didn't really get that on TV. And I was like, well, now we got the Zapruder film out there. And so, we have to do this all over again because that's been leaked. And, look, here's the deal. That is a part of the reason I brought up everything that Tang has dealt with this year because that's what made me mad about that. The Iowa State stuff, I mean, look, I would still fight you on some of it. And Tim Fitzgerald said this the other day, that stuff came initially from, he got fed that he said this on a public Iowa State show. So I feel like I'm not overstepping my bounds saying it. He got it from a national guy who said, I'm in a group text with other Big 12 coaches. And there was an assistant, I think at Oklahoma State that had said to get tipped K-State off on this, hey, watch out on this. So it was not K-State that was the only school in the Big 12 that was worried about what may or may not have been happening behind Iowa State's bench. But regardless, if you do that and it winds up going public because they see you arguing after the game, yeah, I can understand how that would blow up and maybe you should be a little bit more careful there. But he's already got this reputation, right? And so for Self to throw that out there, he knows the credibility that he has, the cachet that he has. And people are going to take that and just attach, Jerome Tang's a whiner. When, yeah, he did the exact same thing that Bill Self did after the game at K-State. Just a quick slap of the hand, move on by. We see it all the time. It's a complete non-story. I do think that some of it is that Kansas was upset about an incident that occurred in the tunnel in Bramlage when K-State won earlier this year that was between assistants, that they got a little mouthy with each other. So I think there was still some bad blood from that because you can see Curtis Townsend is the one in the line in the Zapruder film. If you go find that, Curtis Townsend is the one in the line who turns around and kind of is like, what the heck, even though it looked like Tang did sort of slap his hand. But at this point, I'm too far down the line of examining slapped hands and grassy knolls and all that. So I'll probably just bow out here on that conversation. But that is what made me so mad. I was like, Self knows what he's doing in running down the reputation of Jerome Tang by that for something that is a complete non-issue. And yeah, he didn't bring it up himself in the press conference, but he's getting asked questions about it by media members. And I don't know, man. It peak rivalry. That was peak rivalry stuff there. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I was just sitting here wondering while you're talking through that there between the basketball court and the football field. We just talked to Max Olson about, Leipold's new deal, and obviously Kleiman's got his thing rolling along. I know the Sunflower Showdown and everything that surrounds that rivalry has always been heated, but is this competitive-wise, hatred-wise, dislike, just competitiveness, is this as heated as you can remember Kansas and Kansas State being?
Easily. I mean, 100%, because, when I was growing up, so I grew up in Kansas City. I now live in Kansas City again, and that's when I feel it the most, because obviously there's such a huge Kansas presence in the metro area, and K-State strong too, but you just see a lot of it. And when I was growing up, it was just like, it was so, K-State just dominated in football, was winning 11 games every year in football, and Kansas was awful. And then in basketball, K-State had no shot to make the tournament. They were in the midst of the 30 game to, I think they got to 29 game losing streak against Kansas in basketball. So it was kind of like, you just knew your place. You talked for a couple months out of the year when you were in the position of strength, and that was it. And then there was a while where, KU was still bad at football. K-State was a little better, getting more competitive, but Kansas was still obviously the national power. It was maybe turned up a couple of notches there. But I think what really started to change it was Kansas getting there in football. And all of a sudden, I would tell you, some of the basketball arrogance starts to seep into football pretty quick when, look, they're doing a great job. I think a lot of people are complaining about, was it Feldman that had Lance Leipold as the number 3 coach in the country? I'm not going to fight him being a top 10 coach. I think he's excellent. But, you're also not the Kansas basketball program on the football field as of right now. So there's a lot of that. And then K-State has the year that they had a couple of years ago with the Elite Eight run, and Jerome Tang just pumped so much energy into the program too. It's like Leipold pumped a ton of energy into the program because of the fact that he won. Tang won and just breathed life into a fan base that has been beaten down by the end of the Bruce Weber era and just was kind of over it and not passionate about it anyway. So you had the perfect storm of just a lot of fuel getting added to both fires there. Yeah, I would tell you, absolutely, it is as hot as I have ever seen it in my life.
Somebody in the chat, Stuber27, the hatred is and has been there, but you're right, it seems to be with both the major sports. And we know what KU's done, how great they've been in tradition, and also with Kansas State with the Bill Snyder years. And it ought to be fun, man. It's awesome. John, as always, thanks for your time. Appreciate your patience having to bump you back a couple of different days. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.
Always enjoy it, boys. Anytime.
John Kurtz with us, 365 Sports.
So did Bruce Weber towards the end of that run, I remember when he was here, there was Baylor had some great games with Kansas State. Some I think one was with Frank Martin. They just completely blew it at the buzzer, on an inbound. It was a painful game, but there was a game where Baylor. It was clear that Kansas State had been kind of left behind in the Big 12 in the Bruce Weber era. It wasn't maybe the last year, but last couple of years where it was just they were not who they were before, and Baylor beat them pretty solidly. And I got this exasperated uncle vibe from him, what are you going to do?
Well,
that was just kind of his vibe at that point. And that's, you can tell when a coach is kind of maybe running a cycle, but that's always how I felt about Bruce Weber was he didn't forget how to coach basketball, but the energy and the pace that what the sport was running was kind of overtaking him, because he kind of had that happy-go-lucky, oh, well, this is how it is kind of vibe to him. I got a
vibe from him. First of all, his voice is a little bit, I don't want to say, first of all, your voice is what you have. Mine is mine, yours is yours. But I thought that he got to be, I think he's a really good dude, but it got to be a little whiny. And when you start losing grip, and you're K-State, and you really are a basketball school, but with Snyder and all the success he's had, I just thought he kind of lost grip with it. I never thought anything personal about Bruce Weber. But we're going to get to the point now when they're having a handshake, you watch the handshakes, because I guarantee you, if you watch about every other game or you watch 10 games in one weekend, if you can see the handshake line, I bet half of them are very similar. Whether it's a flyby or a no-by or leave me alone, I've seen it in women's basketball where I think that there's turf wars there too that are always, to me, kind of just like a little bit of one-upsmanship or whatever it might be, or just really big damn egos. When we come back, Tony Caridi, voice at West Virginia, on Neil Brown's extension. He spoke with him one-on-one yesterday and then had an interview that I was able to record with Tony. We'll have that. Paul with Chris Lowe, the top 5. This is 365 Sports. Alan Samuels, Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat, Loop 340 and east of 84 in Waco. Alan Samuels with the new month and new incentives and also offers. And there's always a little bit of a bubble from the time that the end of the month, the month before February. Now they have Dodge Power Shot Days at Allen Samuels in Waco, where the thrill of the drive meets unbeatable savings. Feel the adrenaline as you conquer the road on a 2023 Dodge Durango RT, now with a jaw-dropping $12,500 off. Unmatched performance, room for adventure. The Dodge Durango is ready to take your family outings to the next level, and of course, summer and vacations around the corner. Unleash the power of the 2023 Dodge Charger RT, now available for a remarkable $9,000 off. Feel the rush, the pure performance, style to dominate the urban jungle. Don't miss your chance to experience the thrill of Dodge Power Shot Days. Ted Teague, General Manager and CEO, and a great staff at Allen Samuels, Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat Loop 340, and just east of 84 in Waco.
It was broad daylight. I stepped into a gas station for 5 minutes to grab a snack, and just like that, my car was broken into. They made out like a bandit. My laptop, my phone, everything. I called my agent to see what could be done, and he restored my faith in humanity. My claim was processed so quickly, and I was able to recover my losses.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Thank you for calling your local Marco's Pizza. We're turning up the heat with our new Reaper Cheesy Bread. Fresh, house-made dough is topped with a spicy cheese blend infused with jalapeno, habanero, and Carolina Reaper peppers. At only $5.99, this limited-time product is a hot deal. Add it to your order while you can. A Marco's team member will be with you shortly.
Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers get it, and that offer on the Reaper Cheesy Bread is available right now at any of the 5 Marco's Pizza locations in Waco, including Belmead, China Spring, Robinson, Woodway, and Hewitt. Order online at marcos.com. Call for a pickup or delivery. Marco's Pizza is turning up the heat with their all-new Reaper Cheesy Bread with fresh, hot, house-made dough topped with a spicy cheese blend infused with jalapeno, habanero, and Carolina Reaper peppers, and only $5.99 and for a limited time only. Marco's Pizza, the fastest-growing pizza brand in America, 5 locations in Waco, and the new Reaper Cheesy Bread. Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers get it.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at alliancebanktexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Stepping into a new pair of boots is great, but stepping into the boots of a U.S. Army officer can also add confidence and leadership skills to your son or daughter's career path. There are more than 150 occupational specialties to help them find the best fit for their future. See all the things your son or daughter can achieve in our boots at GoArmy.com. U.S. Army Waco Recruiting Company, 254-598-8131 or 254-776-1543.
This is 365 Sports.
The Sikkim 365 app is brought to you by Allen Samuels Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat. Come by, let's be friends.
Voice of West Virginia Athletics, Tony Caridi, David Smoak, 365 Sports. What a nice week it was when the extension comes down for Neil Brown. I know you spoke with him at length today. This is a guy that was on the hot seat, the alleged list of hot seats. And, of course, West Virginia had a great run, and he had an edge to him, even at Big 12 Media Days. Just the fact that this is out of the way and moving on.
100% agree with you, David, and it's good to be back with you. And I think that you're right. He was on those lists, whatever those lists mean, at the start of the season. Everyone knew the gauntlet that West Virginia had in playing both Pitt and Penn State last season, and then you've got the league schedule that comes your way, and so it was going to be a big time challenge, and they responded. They won 9 games, and he has done what he needed to do to get this extension, and it's good because he has brought this program back on the solid footing. He inherited it in a very difficult stage. The roster had been really depleted, and then you have COVID in his second year. So it was tough. He got it done. He deserves the compliments for it. He gets an extra year, but at the same time,
he did some things within this contract to give money back, about $400,000 back for staff members.
Well, so they're getting a little bit of this as well. And, a lot of times people look at the money the head coach gets or whatever, and the bonus structure, et cetera. What's the buyout? But in this day and age, when you see a new contract, you see that the staff is getting some of this too. How much did he say whether that was a major part of what he wanted to agree to, and also what Ren Baker in the university wanted to do?
It was a very large part of it. And so his thought is this at this point. He has obviously created his foundation, if you would. If you're building a house, he's come in and he's laid down the foundation. And now in this new world that we're living in, because as you well know, in the 5 years he's been here, the world of the portal and the world of the NIL side of things has drastically changed. And so he feels now that he has a great feel as to how to operate and run this program in regard to those two components. And he feels very strongly, as everyone knows, this is no surprise, that your player retention perhaps is as big as your player acquisition. And so I think that he strongly believes that by subsidizing some of those areas within this program even further, it will allow him to retain, to gain players. And ultimately, what does that lead to? It leads to more wins. And so he's basically making the investment long-term that he can win more games as a result of doing this now.
How would you describe, and I mentioned those, lists that people love lists, but how would you describe where he is today compared where he was entering 2023? Is it like the Undertaker coming out of the casket, or is it that's a little bit dramatic?
No, I think it's maybe a little dramatic, but I think you're close. I mean, everyone realized, and including him, and he never ran away from it. Mm-hmm. I mean, he totally got it going into last season, saying, "I get it. I understand. I have to win. I understand what the expectation is." However, at the same time, that still meant that he had to play Pitt, open up at Penn State, and then have Pitt here. And so I think a lot of people, to be quite honest with you, there were some that thought that by late October that West Virginia would have an interim head coach. They really, truly believe that. And to his credit, they did what they had to do. They did lose at Penn State. Then they came home. They beat Duquesne. They beat Pitt. And then they got the win over Texas Tech. They opened up league play with that victory over the Red Raiders, who had been a nemesis. And they finished the month at 3-1. And you go like, okay, here we go. And so to his credit, they bowed up. Garrett Green, the quarterback, emerged, among others. Jaheim White, the running back, who became a freshman All-American. And so, again, David, I mean, I can't tell you, and that was my 40th season covering West Virginia football. I've been doing the games for 20 on the radio, 27 some, and I've been doing them on TV for over 30. That program and that offensive line that he inherited when he first got here was as bad as it's been. He had one player on that offensive line that could play, and his name's Colt McKivitz, and he just started at right tackle for the 49ers in the Super Bowl. But other than that, Matt Moore and his staff, that offensive line coach, they had to build that thing from scratch. And to their compliment, to their credit, they did. And they've got Zach Frazier going to the NFL, and you've got Wyatt Milam, who's coming back at left tackle. He's going to be an NFL guy. Doug Nestor's going to have a really good chance. And they think they've got 5 or 6 guys in the chain now, and I'm talking about even young guys that are going to play one day in the NFL. So they've built it. Defensive line, same thing. Those were their 2 areas, and they made a couple of big hits. Transfer portal, they get Beanie Bishop, who was who was a nickelback and a third cornerback for Minnesota. He comes in here and he leaves as a 13th consensus All-American in school history. And so now they're building off of this thing. And so I think the biggest thing that you've got going right now is you have momentum, which did not exist, certainly did not exist. It was flat deadline momentum, so to speak, at the start of the season. And now that the needle is up and things are trending upward.
So, I'll always remember when we had a chance, he sat down with us at Big 12 Media Days, and his chip was it was a chunk on his shoulder. It wasn't a chip on his shoulder. He was mad because people kind of were scoffing at his team. I absolutely whiffed, admitted that on who I thought they might be. And they used that as a momentum, the colors behind them at the media day, behind the player availabilities or whatever. Give me an idea of Neil Brown, his demeanor, his personality. I always thought he was a hell of a coach, and then just had an off. Like, I don't know if Dave Aranda's got to bounce back, and maybe he might be in the same position right now as what Neil was. Maybe even more difficult. What kind of person is Neil Brown?
Well, obviously I'm prejudiced because I cover him every day, but I've also had the great opportunity here to work with Don Nealon, one of the all-time great coaches, a Hall of Fame coach, played for national championship, went undefeated a couple times here at West Virginia. Rich Rodriguez, who's obviously had, great success. Bill Stewart, who won 9 games, 3 consecutive years. Dana had his time as well at West Virginia. So I've seen a lot of guys. If you were going to take a guy out of central casting and say, what qualities and characteristics do you have to be at West Virginia University and to mesh with the fan base, to understand it and get it and have the attitude? That's the dude. And that's what we said last year when people were starting to say, oh, he might be on his way out. What we would say and what I would say is this: if you didn't put a name on the top of a resume and you took a look at the resume, he checked every single box to a guy that you would want to interview to take the job. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
But the thing that just was not translating, and again, a lot of this goes back to the fact that West Virginia was one of the few teams in the country that are playing 11 Power 5 games a year. That doesn't help them. That was like an extra L every year. That didn't help. And then, we got gutted. We lost 6 defensive starters one spring out of the transfer portal, 6, and that doesn't help you either. And so he's had to run through some obstacles. And, we haven't had that dynamic quarterback that could beat you with his arm and his feet yet until Garrett Green emerged last year. We had guys that had no pocket mobility and no guys that could really threaten you. And Garrett makes, a lot of plays that aren't necessarily called in the huddle. And when you get that guy, and you know this, when you got a guy that can make plays and extend drives, it's a game changer. And then you would have the emergence of these running backs. A year ago it was C.J. Donaldson. This past year it was Jaheim White. The pieces all came together. So, long answer to your short question, he's perfect for West Virginia. And I'm just really hoping he has continued success. Once again, this year we do have Penn State and Pitt. And then, we go to Arizona, we go to Texas Tech. So, it's a challenge, but, this league is going to be a challenge now. But at least we go in there with a slugger's chance every single time.
What's in it? We put up a couple of the images, graphics, whether it's Vegas or who, that they have like their Big 12 power poll, and West Virginia is no longer near or even on the bottom half, which they've earned that, and especially with what they have returning and the stability, as you've mentioned. Have you thought about when it's time for us to do a media poll that we do, when Joni Lehman sends us that email? How in the hell, Tony, are we going to try to piece together 1 through 16 when we don't really – it's nuts in my opinion. I had to ask you that question.
No, I agree with you. And, in a perfect world, they picked West Virginia dead last year, 14. I hope they pick up 16 this year because
they're not going to do that.
They had that thing on every digital signboard within their football complex all season long. And it was great motivation for them. But to answer your question, I don't know. And David, you study this. The quarterbacks in this league are like some wows. I mean, you've got some of the top quarterbacks in the country that are going to go at it. This is going to be fantastic Saturday football in this league this year. And I don't know how you quantify it at this point or say this team's going to be here, this team's going to be there. Plus you throw in some coaching changes and things like that. I don't know how you put a handle on it. What's Dion going to do? What goes on now at Arizona now that they have a coaching change? It's super interesting. That's why we get excited about it. That's why it's going to be fun, I think, going forward.
All right. You mentioned him, the extension. What is, at least from what you can tell me, the latest with Missouri looking for an AD? Ren Baker has been there before. He's attached to Mack Rhodes. You've at North Texas. He's done a great job. Obviously had to weave through some things at West Virginia with Huggy Bear and others. Where is he? Does he understand he's in a pretty good place too?
So he's not going anywhere. Ren Baker's not going to Missouri. You can put that one down in the book. Ren is just getting rolling here, I think, at West Virginia. I talked to him the other day. He still doesn't even have his kitchen cabinets ordered yet. So he's in the process of still putting his house together. He's got 2 young girls that are still, one's in elementary and one's in middle school. He's not a kind of guy that's job popping and hopping. I think he left North Texas because he felt this was a good place for him and his family. He's been at Missouri in the past. He knows what that job is. He knows the challenges they face. And he is at West Virginia, and he's in the process right now. He's got this deal done with NIL on the extension, and now he is looking at the basketball program and does this reevaluation as this comes to an end, and he'll be busy there as well.
By the way, that thought, good. I'm glad to hear that. I love Ren, and we've had him on a handful of times, even back when he was at North Texas. But that's about the same silly rumor that we hear about Louisville basketball and Scott Drew, which is I have not even responded to it on our show, because there's this little speculation out there. Somebody said, how come you haven't talked about that? I said, because then I'm giving it air to breathe. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And I even hate the fact that I brought that up as an analogy with Ren Baker. My last thing, Tony, is the NIL that now NIL kind of has his hands on that. You don't have to be the largest spending school, like some people want to always, like Ole Miss or Texas or others, many schools, but you have to have a grip on it. Plus, also, there's always the facilities thing. How has Ren or West Virginia been able to kind of handle facilities upgrades and NIL? Because there's a lot of people starting to maybe say that it's really creating some friction with donors and others, that they're like, wait a minute, we have to pay the players too and build the buildings?
Right. We're in a super good position right now. We were late to the dance, and that led to some of the lack of success that NIL had. And they have really done a good job. So the trust at West Virginia is called the Country Roads Trust, appropriately enough. And it is headed up by Ken Kendrick, who is a WVU grad and the owner of the Arizona Diamondbacks. And he has been the impetus behind West Virginia's Country Roads Trust. In fact, just today they announced that the WVU baseball complex has been named after his family. He's from West Virginia. He's also a state native. And so West Virginia is dealing in that regard from a position of strength. They're in a good position, both in football, basketball, and to be quite honest with you, in women's basketball as well. And Neil feels really good about it. And we're in a good spot there. And it's supportive. People get it. People understand it. And it's allowed West Virginia to retain those guys that I mentioned. People came after Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson, Garrett Green. They all came after. And West Virginia was able to retain the guys that they absolutely needed and wanted to keep. And conversely, it's allowed them to go out in the portal and pick guys up, pieces that we need. Well, one thing, again, talking about this, I think what's changed, Dave, is that the guys with the biggest stats aren't necessarily the guys you need to go get in the portal. The guys that fit your system the best are the ones. We just went through a basketball season here, or just finishing a basketball season here, in which, they had a portal class among all portal classes that would have been a top 4 team in the Big 12 this year had it stayed together. Bob Huggins had his situation, and so that roster blew up. But that roster was loaded. I mean, Trey Mitchell starts at Kentucky. Joe Toussaint's been a great guard this season at Texas Tech. Mo McGee now is at Alabama. I'm talking about guys that left. James Okonkwo is at North Carolina. We had a bunch of guys take off as a result of that. So West Virginia can work in this world. We've got the finances to work in this world. But the most important thing is put the right pieces in. And my point to all this is, and I'm going to go into basketball now, forget about the points. You got to guard in this league. And if you don't guard, you don't win. Who are the two, not great offenses in this league, but play great defenses? Houston and Iowa State. Oh, where are they in the standings? 1 and 2. So I think going forward, player personnel is going to become a much bigger factor in what it is that we're doing here. And it's not run after stats, but it's run after pieces. It's not different than what we see in the NFL. I mean, you've got a guy and a body type that you need. That's the next wave of how college rosters are going to be built.
Tony, I know you're busy. Thank you as always for your time. Happy as heck for Neil Brown and West Virginia. Tony Caridi, voice of West Virginia athletics on 365 Sports.
Cars priced right, day and night. Average your car in Texas. Trucks built for you, red, white, and blue. Average your car in Texas. Cars that zoom with lots of room. Average your car in Texas. Count on us, a dealer to trust. Average your car in Waco, Texas.
One size fits all. That may be all right for an adjustable belt or cheap sunglasses. But when it comes to your financial needs, no one wants a one-size-fits-all strategy. Cam Heathcott, your Edward Jones financial advisor, knows that his most important goals are yours. That's why we take the time to understand your needs. Knowing you, that's how Edward Jones makes sense of investing. Cam Heathcott in Conroe at 936-756-7717. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
Clinic Men's Healthcare in Woodway is now proud to offer you men an exceptional weight management body sculpting product called semaglutide, also known as Ozempic or Wegovy. Semaglutide is an FDA-approved weight management medication. Once-a-week injections of this powerful medication offers an average body fat weight loss of 20% within the first year of treatment. In addition to body sculpting, semaglutide also normalizes blood sugars and has the clinical research proof of reducing blood pressure, cholesterol, stroke, and heart attack risk. If you're like most men and you have stubborn fat that will just not respond to typical diets and exercise, then help is finally here. Semaglutide, affordable, highly effective. Google search Petty Clinic Waco and reach out to the Petty Clinic team today for a free consultation with Dr. Petty to see if semaglutide is right for you. Go to pettycliniclowt.com.
Pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. Sick 'em, Bears.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 5 o'clock hour is brought to you by Edward Jones and financial advisor Cam Heathcott. Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
365 Sports, Chris Lowe, ESPN.com senior writer. And Chris, all the stuff that you've done on Nick Saban, and we had you on right after, has been really just kind of amazing. Just the amount of facts and like points of view you've been able to grab. This is like outside of everything that's happening around college football, which I know affects his decision. But there's never, like, I can't imagine there being a story like this with as many tentacles around one human being, maybe for the rest of my life. And I'm not old. I'm 43 years old. Like, it just, this is such a huge thing. It's got to have been fascinating for you to work on.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, I've done it. I've covered college football a long time now, 30 years. And I understand how big a transition this is in the sport. I mean, and I'm sort of dating myself here, but I was trying to think of another coaching transition in college sports that would compare. And maybe you got to go all the way back to John Wooden in UCLA basketball, and what a dynasty the Bruins had on the hardwood. And then Wooden went in 7 of 10, and he retires. Nick won 7 overall, 6 at Alabama, and then he retires. Both those guys left programs to their successors that were championship programs. It wasn't like they were mired in scandal or the ship was taken on water. So as I went back through, that was probably the closest example that I could think of. And now, with him gone and the landscape changing around him, with playoff going from 4 to 12, we're seeing NIL now is going to become not only a staple, a fixture in college sports, but it's going to sort of become the component, I think, that drives a lot of things in college sports. And through it all, he's gone. He's not going to be coaching anymore. And I'd say probably around the SEC, there are a few people like Haley saying, "Oh, you know what? The guy that's dominated this sport, this conference for the last 2 decades, is stepping aside. Maybe it's a chance for us now to break through."
Chris, everything that's going on, NIL, you just mentioned, the portal, essentially there's not really regulations anymore. The playoff changes and everything that's happened, it is a completely different game than Nick Saban started coaching. If he was, say, 55, would he take this on as opposed to being in his 70s and already the last couple years starting to think about what his next phase of life is going to be?
I don't want to really answer for him. I know that he told me a couple of different times over the last year that he was never going to hang around just to hang around. When he felt like it was time, if he wasn't doing it at a level that he felt like he should do it, or it wasn't resonating, or his message wasn't what it needed to be, or he felt like it needed to be with the players, he was going to walk away. And that's, I think anybody that knows him knows that's just sort of the way he's wired. So I don't know. I think, at 72, he would have been 73 this football season. I think that's something that was already on his mind. He promised his wife that he wouldn't hang on so long that there wouldn't be that quality of life to go out and do some other things and really live life. And I think that was a big part of this. But without question, this is not, as you said, this is not the version of college football that he liked best or that he grew up with. I mean, the thing he likes best about the sport was teaching and developing and building teams and players and having them from coming in as a freshman and seeing them go from being a kid who probably wasn't ready to play to being an NFL type player his 3rd or 4th year, and then building championship caliber teams. And it's harder and harder to do that, to build and develop teams with the portal combined with NIL, because so many players are bouncing around and moving around. And if you read the story, Nick said, "Listen, I'm not saying that's bad or that's wrong, but what I am saying is I still scouted myself and thought about it. Maybe it doesn't work anymore the way I've done it and the way I did it. So maybe it's best to let somebody else come in and have a shot at it."
That is, look, he's always been a remarkably self-aware person, but that's a hard thing for anybody, like, no matter how old you are, to understand, like, hey, maybe this isn't for me anymore, especially when you've done it as well as he has. He very much, though, wants to advocate for the future of college football. And I for the life of me, can't imagine a better person to take all the issues in and say, like, all right, here's how this is going, here's how we want it to be. He seems to be someone who could reasonably find a middle ground on things and propose solutions to make it work.
Yeah, listen, I think the misconception with Nick is he doesn't want to see kids get paid. That's not right. He said, listen, these kids absolutely deserve to earn money based on their name, image, and likeness. Probably past due to do that. What he wants to see is to get everybody at the table and have sensible conversations about getting away from the chaos that exists right now on all sides, and there being no rules or no regulations, or nobody knows where we're headed. So that's what he wants to see. Football-centric people in the room, administrators, presidents, chancellors. Let's talk about it. Let's get it all out there. Let's figure out a way to make this sport whole again while kids are still able to get a chance to make some money. Because, listen, if coaches are going to make $9, $10, $11, $12 million a year, certainly the players deserve a big piece of that pie. And I don't think I know he's not against that. But he just doesn't want it to be this sort of, it's almost like we're in purgatory right now, that nobody knows where we're headed, how it's going to get fixed, who's going to fix it. I certainly wouldn't hold my breath that Congress is going to fix it. So people that understand, that are boots on the ground, that have coached, that have been ADs, that have been commissioners, they all got to get on the same page and try to figure out a way to get this thing done.
Chris, the Greg Byrne and what he was able to pull off in a very short amount of time. And look, when Nick Saban leaves, they're not going to have any shortage of candidates, but it's hard to go from the list. Every athletic director has, especially since he had some time to maybe think about it, with Nick always telling him like, hey, I'm going to let you, I'm not going to blindside you. You're going to know. And you said in the story that, he had about a year of like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. So Greg has to have that, thought process, but to get Kalen DeBoer and to do all that in 72 hours. I mean, we are in a new world of coaching where you kind of have to do that at certain times a year, but to be able to turn around like that and not get stuck like big programs have. I mean, Texas got stuck twice before they got to Steve Sarkisian. It's really hard to do, and we'll see how Kalen DeBoer does, but to be able to turn that around given all the factors they have and retain that recruiting class for the most part was pretty impressive.
Yeah, the first thing you got to have is you have to have alignment at your university. Your president, your board of trustees, you got to be ready. You got to be on the same page. And Greg was savvy enough to make sure that everybody sort of knew where he was going when he left campus that Wednesday night after Nick retired. There wasn't a lot of infighting or this camp wanted this guy or that camp wanted that guy. And I think that's a credit to Greg. It's a credit to the administration leadership at Alabama. They knew who their two guys were. When he left that night, he knew in no particular order that it was Kalen DeBoer and Mike Norvell. He would have been good with either one of them. They checked the boxes that he was looking for, guys who'd won and won on a big stage, guys who were hungry, guys that had shown the propensity to develop players and teams and build teams. And those two guys were the guys that, like any good AD would do, you don't just have one guy. You have a couple guys, and it ended up being DeBoer. So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of names out there, Sarkisian, Lanning, Kiffin, Dabo Swinney. But as they had those conversations leading up to him leaving, Greg Byrne, the Alabama leadership, decided that the two that best fit where they are right now and made the most sense, not that those other coaches weren't great coaches, were the two that he settled on and eventually got DeBoer. Listen, I mean, I think a guy like Lane Kiffin would have done a great job. Dabo Swinney has Alabama ties. They both, to a lot of people, made a lot of sense. Stan Lanning. But there are also other factors. You got to look at buyouts. Stan Lanning had a massive buyout. I think Alabama was smart enough to know that Sarkisian wasn't going to leave Texas. He was getting ready to go to $10 million per. Texas is going into the SEC next season. And then for whatever reasons, the feeling was that Swinney and Kiffin right now just weren't fit. So, yeah, you got to be ready. And I think to Greg's credit and to Alabama's credit, they were ready when Nick walked away that Wednesday afternoon.
The detail for me, and look, as an FSU grad, was I was initially like a little bit taken aback with it, and then thought about it and wouldn't have hated it. Was if it was Mike Norvell, FSU was ready to make a run at Lane Kiffin, which I got to tell you, at first I was like, I don't know, because I really do like Coach Norvell, but I wouldn't have hated it. And given how brash FSU is kind of now publicly, it seemed like a marriage that would work. Do you think that, being that Ole Miss, while they are in the SEC, would have been vulnerable to that because Florida State is a program who has won and won big multiple times with different guys?
Yeah, well, Michael Alford at Florida State, I think he deserves a lot of props too, because they just were not going to lose Mike Norvell. And I think they were scared early that Friday morning that they were going to lose him. But they stepped up financially. They stepped up in giving him assurances that they were going to do everything they possibly could to invest in football with the staff, recruiting budget. And sure enough, later that day, it came out that they were going to pay him, $10+ million a year to keep him. And I also think, though, like, again, any good AD, any seasoned AD, is you're going to be ready. And I do believe had Norvell been the guy at Alabama, that Lane Kiffin would have been target number one for Florida State. And
I'm a believer that Lane Kiffin can win just about anywhere. I think he's proven that. He's never really had, since he got fired at SC, he went to Florida Atlantic at a smaller level. He's going to Ole Miss. He's done things at Ole Miss that they've never done before. So I think it all makes a lot of sense. And we saw in that 49 hours a lot of things moving and shaking, at the center of it all. All these guys we just discussed were represented by Jimmy Sexton. And there's a reason that Jimmy is the best agent out there. There's a reason all these coaches get him to rep them, because he's the guy that ADs and presidents and chancellors, even though a lot of schools have had to pay a lot of big buyouts, they trust him. They understand that he's going to, when he negotiates, he's going to be a tough negotiator, but he's going to try to do it the right way. And so it wasn't like all these schools, be it Greg Byrne or Michael Alford at Florida State, were having to deal with different agents, because Jimmy represented all these coaches.
Yeah, he had, just the best week I think anybody in the sports business has ever had that week. And, of course, he was already sitting on that gold mine just waiting for it to happen. But when it came to Kalen DeBoer, and, there's all these, kind of cliches about you don't want to be the guy who replaces the guy. He absolutely did not subscribe to that. Do you feel most coaches would be like him, or did he stick out in that there would have been a lot of coaches that are like, listen, as much as I would love to be at Alabama, I'll just wait for somebody to mess that up so that I can, kind of play my savior complex there?
Yes, some would be, and I've talked to some over the years who said that. There's no way that I would ever want to go in and follow Nick Saban. And these are guys, mind you, that have established jobs that are big time programs for making a lot of money. And I think that's, when you have to do, if you're Greg Byrne, you're Alabama, and you have to make a hire like this, you want to make sure that you're not, as I said a minute ago, you're not sort of walking down that aisle and kissing the bride, but they never had any chance, any real, they weren't going to marry you. And I think they did not want to get in a position where someone was leveraging them. And I think from the get-go, Greg Byrne knew that Kalen DeBoer wanted the job. And he told him, very frankly, listen, I know there's that adage out there, you never want to be the guy that replaces the guy. You want to be the guy that replaces the guy that replaces the guy. He said, but, and I think this is what really jumped out to Greg Byrne, along with a lot of other things, his track record. There's only one guy who's ever going to be able to do that will ever be able to say, I'm the one that went in and replaced a legend like Nick Saban. And I want that challenge. I embrace that challenge. And I think if you spend any time with Kalen DeBoer, he's a very forward-thinking guy. He's authentic. He's real. And he's not afraid to be who he is. There's going to be a ton of people the next year who are going to say, well, you know what? That's not the way Saban did it. Or Saban would have done this or would have done that. He respects the heck out of Nick Saban, but he is going to, in this process, he's going to be exactly who he is. And to this point, I'd say it's worked out pretty darn well when you talk about a guy 14 years ago who was coaching NAIA football and winning championships. He was an OC at Indiana 5 years ago. He goes to Fresno State. And in year number 2 at Washington, oh, by the way, he's got his team in the national championship game.
Chris, the thing I think in the immediacy that was kind of shocking, or like kind of not shocking, but Alabama had to live with the transfer portal the way that everybody else did, in that they lost a coach, they lost a ton of players to the portal because they were probably getting guys because Saban was the coach and you were going to play for Nick Saban, not necessarily for Alabama. But that's one thing. The recruiting class, to be able to keep all of them, really except for Julian Sayin and one other, was really remarkable to me, given that seemed even as tenuous when a coach leaves as anything else. How was Kalen DeBoer able to go in and keep those guys that the Saban staff had already recruited, for the most part? I think about 92% of the class stayed, and not have to deal with building it up from zero.
A big reason, I think, is you watch his teams the last couple of years, the way they play offense, the way guys rack up big numbers. And I think that sort of sells itself. You say, hey, look at what we did at Washington. Look at how we played. Look at the numbers and the opportunities the guys got. And I think that's one. And the other thing I think was maybe underrated, and Kalen talked about it when I spent some time with him a couple of weeks ago, is you had some real pillars on that team at Alabama. guys like Tyler Booker, Malachi Moore, Jalen Milroe, Deontay Lawson, guys that were returning that stepped up and said, hey, we're not running from change. Just because we love Coach Saban, we came here, but this is Alabama. We still feel like we got a chance to win at the highest level. We like what we hear from this guy. We believe in him, his vision. Kalen told me that to him was a real tone setter. As that first week or 2 weeks started to play out, that was one of those things that, as you talk about kids that were coming in from the recruiting class and other kids that they were looking at in the transfer portal, that made a real difference. And I think it did because, hey, they were able to get some guys too. He brought some guys with him from Washington, one of the better young offensive linemen in the Pac-12 coming with him. And I think you'll see them probably pick up a few guys in the spring portal as well because they've still got a few spots on that roster available.
Yeah, they're still Alabama, and when that phone rings, I'm sure people will take that call. Chris, thanks so much for hopping on the show. Love your work. Love it anytime when we get to talk to you. Really appreciate you doing this. If you guys have not read the story, it's on ESPN.com. There's so many different things that happened in that crazy time period, and Chris gives a great deal on it. Thank you so much. This is 365 Sports.
Rev up your excitement. Celebrate the spirit of adventure during the Jeep Celebration event. Join us at Allen Samuels in Waco as we roll out incredible deals on rugged and reliable Jeep vehicles you love. Seize the moment and drive home in the new Jeep of your dreams. With special financing options and exclusive offers, there has never been a better time to explore the world of Jeep. Hurry in, the savings won't last long. Visit AllenSamuelsDCJ.com and see them firsthand only at Allen Samuels in Waco. Let your adventure begin.
Come by, let's be friends.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be a part of the Waco community. We're a small family business right here in Central Texas, and our goal is to bring down the cost of healthcare while maintaining high quality. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important, and unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. That's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through the difficult time. We offer premium MRIs just like a hospital with state-of-the-art technology and specialists, but you'll pay less. Sometimes thousands of dollars less, whether you're using insurance or not. At Ideal MRI, we accept most insurance and there are no hidden costs, even offering financing if that's needed. Everything included in the price, and you'll not get something as a surprise in the mail later on. If you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. They'll know. You can schedule an appointment safely from home online in minutes at idealmri.com or give us a call, 833-IDEAL-MRI, idealmri.com.
TFNB Your Bank for Life is the official local bank of Baylor Athletics. Find out why more Central Texas are making TFNB their bank for life. Sign up for our Edge checking and savings accounts to earn interest or cash back. With 5 convenient locations and an award-winning mobile app, banking has never been easier. TFNB Your Bank for Life. Member FDIC.
You want to know why Stonewood Dental is so successful? Listen to what happy customers have to say.
It's pleasant. It's different than any other dentist office. I really feel like they care. And it's not that you're here for 2 hours waiting on someone to take care of you. It's quick and easy, and I bring my kids, and my kids love being here too. They really love the treasure box. Staff is really nice and accommodating, real friendly. You feel more like home. It's not sterile looking. Everybody has their own personalized rooms with decorations and decor, and they'll even have a blanket for you when it's cold. I've recommended people to actually come here, and they are patients now. I really love it here. It feels like family.
Learn more, stonewood-dental.com.
It's time for Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas-raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome back, 365 Sports. Top 5 most interesting teams in the NFL draft. This one's been gathering dust for 2 days now before we got to do it because it was supposed to be for Wednesday. So We're going to roll up here today. Number 5, the Denver Broncos. They were, I thought we might get to talk about this in Off the Radar yesterday if we had a show because of the whole Russell Wilson thing, but it is such a strange deal for Sean Payton to go in pretty much already knowing he didn't want Russell Wilson and have to ride that out for a year, and then them taking this huge bath on the salary cap on it. And they have the 12th pick in the draft. They need a quarterback. I would assume that they're going to try and get one. But to me, they're very interesting in how do you do that and how do you build around this guy they've got, a normal amount of draft picks, but with, this huge chunk off your salary cap for the next couple of years. The team clearly in transition. Sean Payton trying to prove something. This is an important year for him in the Broncos.
What is this again?
Most interesting teams in the draft.
Okay.
They've got maybe more interesting storylines than everybody else.
Okay, yeah, I mean, certainly Sean Payton's got some questions to answer, and the whole Russell Wilson situation just crumbling the way that it did was fascinating. Don't think a lot of people are crying for Russell Wilson either. He's really just not made many fans, has he? I remember a time not long ago,
he was,
and I guess it was long ago, where he just seemed like a nice dude that a lot of people liked, and just in the years since, I just don't hear a lot of good things about him. It's unfortunate, but they definitely have a lot of questions. I know our man Deontay is a big Broncos fan, so last year was a roller coaster for him. But yeah, what do they do at quarterback, and how do they start to shift this thing under Payton's in his vision? I guess. What does that look like?
Number 4, the Raiders. Picking at 13 right now, but they desperately need a quarterback, and I don't think that they're going to roll out with Aiden O'Connell. No offense to former Purdue star, and Jack loves Aiden O'Connell. He talks about him all the time. I kid. But they're at 13, so theoretically somebody could follow them, but you would think that before 13, those top 4 quarterbacks are going to be off the board. So they're going to have to move and do something, and the thing I think is interesting about the Raiders is for the last few months, they actually look like they're doing things the right way. And they've maybe stumbled across a leadership group that works there. And that would be the first time in a long time. And we'll see how long before Mark Davis gets frantic and blows it up. But if they can actually get their quarterback in the draft, that is their quarterback of the future and can legitimately be there for a few years to replace Derek Carr, that would be huge. But they were just good enough to where now that's a bit of a question going into this draft.
Yeah, I mean, when Aiden O'Connell kind of showing a little something that maybe...
A little bit, but I still think that they would,
you probably go for a big first-round type talent. But, I don't know who that would be at that point or who's available. Given what's projected. So who would be the next tier of quarterbacks?
I mean, you're talking about maybe if you get to 13 of those 4 guys are gone, which I think McCarthy's now widely thought to be the 4th one. If McCarthy's gone, then you wait until the second round and hope that Nix and Penix are there. And
that's true. Yeah, that could definitely. I could see one of those guys being attractive and Raider worthy. Aiden O'Connell, he flashed some things, but I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see them move in the direction of a franchise quarterback. That just did not work the way they thought. The whole transition from Derek Carr to Jimmy G and all of that was not at all what they were hoping for, nor was their head coaching position it's supposed to be Antonio Pierce by the end of the year.
No.
But they seem to love him and are rallying around him, and it's like this is about as Oakland as Las Vegas is going to get, probably ever again. So they seem to be all in on Antonio Pierce and him knowing the Raiders' mythos and how that franchise operates. And they've got a big old fun city to lure free agents too, and it's a different ball game for them, but they kind of are still the same old Raiders in some ways. So can they get that franchise quarterback and kind of get over that hump?
I feel like that they have that Vegas is taking them in.
Yeah,
they have.
Just when we were there for the Super Bowl, for the few days we were there, you could kind of, first of all, Allegiant Stadium is freaking right. I mean, it's just like a huge spaceship landed right in the middle of the city. But they really have. It's a Raiders city. And sometimes that's not always the case when you move from one city to the next, but they did a good job in getting that city ready for them.
I meant to ask y'all, what y'all think of the Sphere? Did y'all see very much of that?
Oh,
Yeah,
we saw it from the party.
The eyeball was a little strange.
Sometimes it looks cool, and sometimes I'm just like, it looks kind of stupid. Like just the big yellow smiley face in the middle of the city. But,
I do think that like there's just a couple dudes in a room taking mushrooms and
coming up with stuff.
Let's put this out there and see if it flips out the city.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on what version I see of it. It looks really cool, and then sometimes I'm just like, it looks like really bad marketing or something. But no, I've heard people that have gone to concerts there say it's just like the most amazing experience ever. But I hadn't asked y'all about that.
So Dhani Jones is on the show with us, and he asked us, "Are you going to the U2 show at the Sphere?" And I said, "Nobody invited me." He goes, "General admission." So after he got up, I looked, and it was like $380
for one ticket.
For one ticket, and I would have been like, "No, I'm not." Like I would love to go and see U2 at the Sphere, although I would have to have for $380. They would have to sign a contract. Bono would have to sign it in front of me saying, that album we got on Apple that was the worst thing we ever did.
Still on my computer.
Yeah. That Apple, that thing that's still there.
Yep, still there.
They can't play that. $380. If they play one song, one note of one song of that album, I get my money back.
You can't delete it. I've tried 100 times to delete it off my iTunes, and you can hide it.
Yeah.
And then it inevitably comes back up at some point, and you can only hide it. And I don't know how to get into like the deep files to erase it entirely, but it's still there. It's like 7 years later.
If anybody knows how arrogant you can be as a rock star, when Apple comes to you and goes, "Hey, we got an idea. We're going to put this album on every iPhone." If you don't even have a second of doubt and like, "Hey, not everybody in the world likes us." I mean, a lot of people do, but not every single person in the world likes us. That to me is a level of confidence that is heretofore unknown.
Pretty big ego to think that everybody's just going to roll with that. And did not happen that way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Number 3, the Bears. The Bears at number 3. They have the first pick in the draft, and they're probably picking Caleb Williams. They do not have a second-round pick, but they'll probably get one because they're going to trade Justin Fields. And I would think that a second-round pick for him is pretty fair, given that he's a young quarterback who's played fairly well with a lot of upside. And right now, he doesn't cost you all that much contractually. If you don't like him, you can be out of this deal in 2 years and move on to the next one. So they're going to have some pretty good picks in each round to build up a team that it looks like they are also starting to come around the corner. And if they get a second-round pick, then that gives you a real opportunity. Oh, they also have it doesn't really matter if they don't get a second-round pick because they also have the 9th pick in the first round. So you can have the first pick, the 9th pick, and some pick between 33 and 67 or 68, whatever it is, that is going to get you into the 64, but 64 that's going to get you 3 really solid players who could start for you in a year. Now I wouldn't say the NFC North is wide open because the Lions are good. Jordan Love appears to have erased any kind of longing for Aaron Rodgers that might have, been fractionally left over in Green Bay. But this means the Bears need to strike while the iron's hot because the Vikings are a little vulnerable right now, and the Lions and Packers aren't waiting for you. So if you've got this opportunity to make a move, you got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know when the time will come again, and if it comes too soon, that means that you've had another bad run. So, you got to take full advantage, but it's an exciting draft for Chicago. I mean, I would think Caleb Williams is the obvious choice at number 1, although I'm sure there will be plenty of roller coaster reports leading into the draft here over the next over the next month and change now at this point. But, yeah, that's exciting to have 2 picks like that. I've seen my franchise have, that happen, I think, on one occasion. Just sucks, though, when you get, like, the big star, flashy offensive weapon, and then you go get, like, the lineman, But it's like you have to have that guy, though, too, to protect the other guy or to help the other guy. But, yeah, ideally you're getting, like, Caleb Williams, and then you're getting, like, Roma Dunze or something like that.
I've seen a lot of mocks with that exact scenario.
I'd be over the moon if I was a Bears fan. Are you kidding me? I'd do backflips, and I can't do backflips.
There'd be people getting tattoos of, like, the 2 of them.
Oh, my God. I'd go insane. But, that's fun to have, so we'll see what they do with it.
Number 2, the Cardinals. Now, this is a ridiculously poorly run organization, and this is why they're constantly in this spot. But they were able to spin off a pick to the Texans last year that they used to jump into the top. So they had 2 top 3 picks in Stroud and Anderson. They now have the Texans' first-round pick, and the Texans still had a first-round pick to deal with because of the Deshaun Watson deal. So the Cardinals have pick number 4 and pick number 27. I do not think that they stay at 4. Because if they stay at 4, sure, you can draft Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, or Malik Neighbors, whoever you think the best wide receiver is. And I think that's their biggest area of need for Kyler Murray as he continues on as their quarterback. But more than likely, there's going to be a team out there like the Vikings, the Broncos, or the Raiders that desperately want to trade up and get that fourth quarterback from you. And I do think that they will trade that pick and load up on the way down the draft, especially since they have that other one coming at 27. And this is a team that's not exactly two first-round draft picks away from, hoisting a Lombardi trophy, especially being in a division with the 49ers and a good Rams team. So they have an opportunity to really get a ton of picks here and build out at every position and take a deep draft at wide receiver, which is very deep, and get one or two guys to help their wide receiver core and move on. I'm curious to see what they do with it, because this is not a group that is classically making great decisions when it comes to picking their players.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about the Cardinals. They're just sort of there for me at this point. I mean, they're clearly making the decision to continue rolling with Kyler. That's great. But beyond that, if you had said that they didn't even play last year, I wouldn't have noticed. I mean, honestly, I really probably wouldn't have noticed. They were just background noise and results to me, because they're in such a flux right now. But it's all in on Kyler now or never, right? I mean, if you're going to win with him, you got to win now, because otherwise you got to start making your exit plans on what the future is really going to look like, and how much time do you continue to give him to say, this is the guy that's going to lead us back to the promised land? Or am I crazy there?
No, you're not. And look, they just gave him an extension a couple years ago, so they've got to kind of ride out the meaty part of that.
But it's like now or it's never. Yeah. Like, you're not getting another contract after this if you don't get some skins on the wall as far as results go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Number 1, the Chargers. They sit at 5. They have an eccentric, I'll call Jim Harbaugh a genius. I think he's a pretty damn good coach. Kind of an eccentric genius, mad scientist guy at the head coach that knows how to build winners. He did it in San Francisco. He obviously did it in Michigan. He did it at Stanford. He's done it everywhere he's been. And he's got a quarterback to build around, and they pick at 5th. They don't need a quarterback, and say the Cardinals don't trade their pick, that's going to put the Chargers in position to maybe do that. But Brock Bowers is going to be sitting there. There's a lot of good offensive linemen. There's a lot of things the Chargers can do. I would not be surprised to see this team, of the teams in the top 10, be the one that's really good, really fast, because they'll stop wasting Justin Herbert's potential. Now, they have a lot of things they have to do with veterans and make decisions that way, but a couple of tweaks here and there, and I really feel like, especially as locked in as Jim Harbaugh gets to things, that they could be really good, really fast, in spite of, playing in the same division with the Chiefs. They could maybe start to make some headway there.
Did you hear and I don't mean to interrupt, the Chiefs are now the most hated NFL franchise?
Yeah, because they win.
And not the Cowboys.
People hate winners.
People hate winners.
We love the rise, and then when they win too much, we start to hate the success.
Yeah, I mean, and then there's a whole Taylor Swift backlash that's just so stupid. I cringe every time I see another headline involving that at all, because it's just so silly. But yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. The Chargers, though, I mean, they're just sort of in a great spot, but in a weird spot, because they haven't had much success here. But I think it's awfully exciting. You look around that division, the Raiders obviously have their new Diggs and their new coach that they hope's the guy for a while, and now they're going to probably go get their new quarterback, but they've got some other things that you really like about them. The Chiefs are the Chiefs, obviously, and the Broncos now moving on from Russell Wilson. They're going to go get a quarterback and see how Sean Payton starts to build this thing up. So the division itself is pretty clear who the top dog is, and then the other three are just all kind of in a similar spot. The Chargers, unlike the other two, have their quarterback, but now do they have their head coach? I think so. I don't know how you could have done much better than Jim Harbaugh, and so I'm excited to see. I know people are torn on or polarized by him, or torn on whether you like him or you don't like him or not, but I do, regardless, think he's a great football coach, and I'm excited to see kind of how he goes about building this thing. So yeah, I'm fascinated by what he starts to do with the Chargers and that roster and the draft and everything else that comes with that.
Yeah, the people in Michigan will take bullets for him now.
Winner natty, baby.
You're talking about 27 years between titles. right? In a place that used to just, book 2 days. Like, if we lose the Big Ten, we're going to play on this day. If we win the Big Ten, we're going to play on this day. So we're okay no matter what. Like, it's Rose Bowl or the national championship. And then from 1997 on, like, until he got there, you couldn't even really think about it. And so, yeah, the dude wins.
Yeah,
and yes,
he does.
He's very off-puttingly strange. I get it. If I had to cover him, I would like kind of walk out of there every day going, I don't know what just happened. I don't know what press conference I was just at. But the bottom line is he's not there to win press conferences. He's there to win football games, and that's what I think the Chargers are about to do.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's. I think he has. Does he have rabbit ears though? Or he's going to do what he's going to do, but I don't know if he's driven by that or what. But the guy seems like he
think that
has a
keeps
plan.
His chip on the shoulder, or he just doesn't hear it.
Well, I mean, there was nothing in the NFL. San Francisco has rivals.
Mm-hmm.
Stanford has rivals. Stanford Cal's a huge rival, and of course they like to beat USC, etc. But there's nothing like Michigan, Ohio State, where he's been, where he had to beat the beast, get to catch them, and then beat them, and then win a national title while doing that was about as sweet as it could get for him.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean that's why he left. Is he accomplished all that and moved on, and now he's got the Chiefs instead of Ohio State. So let's see what he does with that. But yeah, that's basically what he's trading it for. So can he take down Patrick Mahomes and company the same way he eventually took down the Buckeyes? That's going to be the process that we start to see unfold, and will be interesting in the draft to see how they go about that. And I'm looking forward to it. I think it makes the Chargers a lot more interesting than they've been in quite a long time.
One note, remember earlier this week, one of the stories was Dartmouth voted to become unionized, right? And there's still a lot of red tape with that. Amanda Kristovich had the tweet about the men's players voting to unionize 13-2. And then I just thought this was cool, and I've had it for so many days. I wanted to get through it before the end of the week. Matt Grossenbach, first order of business is to fire the 15 employees that went 5-2 in the Ivy League. And I saw a stat where it's been over 20-something years since Dartmouth finished above 500 in the Ivy League. Harvard's been good, Colgate's been good, but I thought that was kind of just a little bit of funny that we sometimes need to say. Scott Drew today saying that Langston Love remains day-to-day. I don't think you'll see him play tomorrow against Texas Tech. I think they're going to, again, that's kind of a game that you want to win. You've got momentum, but you also want him to be available, and they came back early with him against BYU, remember, and he sustained that injury again, and so they're going to be careful with that. Do you guys want to close it out with the thoughts about what's happening with Temple men's basketball and the gambling watchdog firm that's flagged their game against UAB?
It's a very weird story, and the line moved almost 6 points, right? Or maybe 6 full points from 2.5 to 8.5. And there was a lot of action on it. And it's such a weird thing. I can't wait to hear the details, but there are some pretty interesting statistics on it about in the history of Temple basketball. They've never been out-rebounded as badly as they were last night. And so that's a story that bears watching, and I'm curious to see how it's responded to by the governance structure of college athletics, given everything that's gone on and the state of Pennsylvania and all that. Like what happens there? Because it looks pretty bizarre.
I saw some gambling dudes who were among the first to take note of the spread and had kind of called it out, and then I guess it shifted over the amount of time it did after that. But it's not the first time they've looked suspicious this year, apparently. So, yeah, you definitely scratch your head and wonder what's going on, and there's not enough coincidence going around to think that that's just happened that way. It's dumb luck that just worked out this way, or a bunch of people there's something behind it very clearly, and that's why so many people called foul on it. So, I mean, this is what you wanted when you wanted to legalize sports gambling and have it, structured the way that it is now. And I'm just getting ready because this is not going to be the last story. This is just going to be amongst the first stories that we get, in
like
this
the Alabama
era.
Baseball one, remember?
Or Iowa State with their athletes. And, I know that's taken a different turn where there was some overreach there, but, get ready. This is probably going to be a situation where every year we're talking about some story or another. But if we start getting into the actual point shaving, which I'm not saying that's what this is, but that's what you can kind of assume, then that's obviously going to be a much bigger story in due time. But yeah, if I'm Temple, I'm very curious about I guess if I'm Temple, I don't know, am I hiding something or am I not? If I'm the basketball program, we're going to find out, because that's not going to fly. No matter how much everything seems like it just flies nowadays, they're not going to put up with potential point shaving or scandals like that, because that will actually bring the whole house of cards down, and they're not going to play around with that. So that's going to be a very interesting story to follow up on here in the coming days and weeks.
I was wrong. Colgate's in the Patriot League. I got them confused when I said Cornell. I thought I said Did I say Cornell or Colgate?
You said Colgate.
All right.
I'd say Cornell.
It was Cornell because they played Baylor, I think, the first game, wasn't it, at the Foster Pavilion. Jack McKenzie, wonderful job. We're back on Monday. Paul with Triple Option at 1. This show at 3 o'clock. Hope you have a great weekend. Last games in the Big 12 in men's basketball. Baylor women won earlier today up in Kansas City to move into the next round. So thank you, all of our guests, our sponsors, those of you in the chat. We mentioned happy birthday to Kim, but thanks to all of you who came back after a day and a half of electrical issues, and you were here with us today. We're glad and thrilled to be back. I'm David Smoak for Paul Catalina and Craig Smoak. Good night, and Jack McKenzie, 365 Sports.
Ideal MRI is a small family business right here in Central Texas. We're open to support you while lowering the cost of healthcare bills. When you need an MRI, ask your doctor for an Ideal MRI. Visit us at idealmri.com or call us at 833-IDEAL-MRI.